And we're live, Duvid and I. Duvid has kindly agreed to be my guest on Koraniyule, and he's had a revival of his streaming career. You're going to get more busy from now on, aren't you? You'll be streaming later with Church of Entropy. Is that right? Have I got the time and day right?
Yeah, we year in review scheduled for 6 o'clock, 4 hours from now, 6 o'clock p.m. And she had suggested trying to do a month in review, although I doubt it's going to be popular because it'll probably be more our research and technical. And if it's only once a month, it's unlikely to get much viewership outside of that. And then, I just like watching Koraniyule and SJJ. I really didn't have any clue who any of these people were. It's very complicated. You have to spend so much time listening to find out who these people are, what their deal is, why they're streaming, and often streamers you are purposely hiding information about themselves because they're there for to promote something. So falling out of the personality aspect of it, I mean, you're basically non-entity. You could still stream to just have a conversation about a niche topic with a handful of people that you might like math or consciousness or the various issues. Although I have remained relevant as, I guess, like a dissident Jew, and so people still relatively frequently contact me, or mostly the Albert Bashai space where I go, but still regularly people contact me for just to be the anti-Zionist dissident Jew, or honest Jew who will actually say what the books say or something like that. So in that respect, I'm still in the circuits, but not on my channel, not my own streaming. And I could explain why I've largely dropped out of streaming and why I feel I'm no longer relevant, especially concerning what's going on with Judaism. That I'm not really relevant as a Jewish streamer now, so I'm not really putting myself out there as a Jewish streamer.
But aren't you still in demand because people remain obsessed about Jews? Probably even more now. Now that
I'm,
Nick
I'm only
Fuentes has been guest
I'm
on
only on
Columnist.
demand from yes, I'm only on demand from dissidents and opponents of the Jews from various levels. So I mean, like, relatively, there's still a wide array of various opponents of their perception of Judaism as a group strategy, that I'm a valuable resource to talk to. But in that sense, like, I don't really want to be like a traitor to, if the war is already settled, I've voiced my opinions about my disagreements with the Jews, although I'm not going to side with the enemy of the Jews. Although I did want to make clear, like, going on Albert Bashai is an anti-Zionist activist, that I do think I warned about the genocide. Like, I mean, say like, well, I had no idea Israel's going to commit genocide. Well, what about Duvid? Duvid told you 5 years ago that he thought Israel was going to commit genocide. Even on those streams, my most viral streams with Adam Green, Eric Stryker, I always said that my biggest fear was that Israel was going to commit genocide much more than anti-Semitism. And even IRL, like, warning Jews I know locally. So now, here we have it, where it's 2 years into the genocide, however bad it is, and it's continuing, that the mainstream organizational Jewry is to basically, there is no plan B to ethnic cleansing, that Israel or global Zionism is going to keep on pushing for ethnic cleansing, genocide. We could talk about how bad it is, maybe hundreds of thousands already dead, or whatever the situation. And I just wanted to completely clarify that, I mean, honestly, I think that hundreds, thousands of Jews need to be tried for war crimes, in relative to like Nick Fuentes or any like the vocal anti-Semites, that there's no comparison to the Jewish crimes that God forbid, have been committed over the last 2 years. And I was even mentioning, like, it'd be interesting for you to talk and reminisce, because you've been around since I've been around, and relatively, with all the nationalism and the blue-eyed man, the whites complaining and the plotting and the scheming and Trump, the Jews, in the meantime, have successfully committed genocide. I mean, they're still in the process. There's still a lot more people to kick out or kill, but with all the blabber going on, that meanwhile, the Jews are well on their way to successfully committing genocide. God forbid.
But isn't it interesting that Jews do have a divine obligation to commit genocide with the Amalekites? That is
Yeah,
a
I mean
religious
that's why
obligation,
it's
isn't
so.
it?
That's why it's so. I guess it's that's why I'm still wearing my yarmulke. I still fear God because you know I largely knew this was going to happen because I studied the books and this is what the book said and this is what the sages say. And then as I became less religious, you really start to question whether this stuff matters or the predictive power or some sage talking about the how current affairs are going to go, and you see things going in that direction, and that's part of why my new plea to say Judaism's a mythological identity. So even because I'm going to say locally now,
Mythological?
just to say why people who were complete anti-Trumper liberal Jews that were Hillary Clinton, not the Bernie Sanders, but the full Democratic, liberal, everything about woke. If they're part of Jewish organizations, they're basically pro genocide, and so now you've had this shift where liberal Jews are caught up in this genocide, and the question is, what is it about Jewish identity that like relatively turns normal, good, decent Jews into genocidal maniacs? And it's saying it is the religion. It's these teachings in this, the basic question that when I first went to Israel that I mean, really people ask about Islam, but it's like, if your rabbi told you to kill somebody, would you kill somebody? And if God told you, if your perception, and Jews have this dilemma because you're defending, if you're attached to the Jewish identity, you say, what does it even mean to be a Jew? And it's this mythological. I was telling Jennifer, we'll probably discuss tonight, it's very similar to the Aryans, where it's like, I'm the real Aryans. Like, the Aryans are mythological people. There were no Aryans. It's just some nonsense for you to pretend like you're special. And then you say, like, well, the Jewish people are mythological people. There are no Jewish people. And when you cling on to the identity, you're clinging on to the biblical identity, and then you have to conform yourself to the myth. And next thing you know, someone that was a woke activist preaching leftism in America is defending genocide, committing genocide.
Well, perhaps Jews aren't the only ones who've committed genocide. How would you define genocide? It seems to be one of those
I'm
sort
not
of
making the claim that
words about,
Jews or
maybe I could
Israel are
say
the
just
only
about
one committing genocide, but I would say just um, the attempt to kill a people. I mean, as I said, like, side is like the same word, a homicide, patricide, fratricide, the killing of, and like gene, a genetic line, a family line. So it's the attempt to wipe out a a people, and generally, it's saying like minimally they've killed probably 5%, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's already at 10-20% of the Gazans are going to be dead from once the numbers are counted, and just in terms of the destruction of the houses. And to me, the intent was clear. Like when we first met you, when we first started talking almost 10 years ago, I straight up told you that I thought they were going to eventually try to commit genocide. And to me, the intent was clear. um, and the intent was clear even before October 7th. Which is October 7th, okay, was what drew regular Jews, which is really what trapped regular Jews. And like October 8th, I was out there saying, do not bomb Gaza, do not invade Gaza, do not fall for this trap. But your average Jew fell for the trap after October 7th. And now, basically, even normal British liberal Jews, U.S. Jews are really fully complicit with the genocide. It's been 2 years. I mean, to claim that like people didn't know what's going on, they didn't know that what they were doing was increasing the genocide 2 years later, and especially like it hasn't even stopped. Now that like they've got all the hostages back and the genocide continues, I think at this point, Jews globally would be lucky to just have thousands of war criminals. Like Jews we should consider ourselves lucky to only have to give up hundreds or thousands of our leaders as war criminals. I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen in terms of, like, people are going to keep on doubling down, or the biblical prophecy, or the groups of interest. But saying, like, I would have, if I was in charge, and I'm not, I would just give up hundreds of our war criminals, apologize, immediately grant all Palestinians full citizenship, and I would testify against my own certain of my own fellow Jews and say, you are a war criminal. I'm sorry. You knew that they were going to commit genocide. You purposely lobbied and lied to the U.S. government in order to help this genocide. At this point, there's hundreds of thousands dead, and you are criminally complicit. I'm sorry. And that, I mean, that
I
might go,
suppose
I don't know
it's
the
a
level of, like,
byproduct of imperialism, would you say?
that what?
Genocide is a byproduct of imperialism?
I mean, genocide's a crime. I mean, that's what, when Tucker Carlton
Well, it's not
interviewed.
a crime as far as God's concerned if the victims are Amalekites. I mean, are we going to take the Bible literally or not?
No, I'm largely completely disregarding the Bible other than as an explanation for why Jews are committing genocide. So, I mean, I'm giving a legalistic moral framework that has nothing to do with the Bible. The Bible is only important in understanding why Jews are doing what they're doing.
I'm reminded of a time when I attended a talk by the late Rabbi Sachs, and there was a Jew there, and he seemed genuinely concerned about the religious obligation of Jews to exterminate Amalek. And
I mean, if you
I
remember,
said,
that was
"Oh,
my biggest source of topic for years of streaming. It was like Eke Luke's, that, like, he came on my stream for hours and pressed me about a Moloch, and I was like, no, that's not what it means. That's not what Jews believe. Like, some people hold that, but like Maimonides. But here we have, like, that's what I say, is Judaism what Jews do, or what the sages teach? And like, okay, I'm scared as a God-fearing person because the sages say really scary things, and I say, like, I mean, I will clearly lay out to you what kind of the mainstream Kabbalah or sages teach. And it's saying, like, Jews don't realize this, because if you're a Jew who knows what your own books say, there is nothing more scary than what our own books say. And it's much less scary than what the anti-Semites have in store for us. I mean, because really our religion teaches that basically we're going to be sacrificed and die horrible deaths for some greater good. And it's very difficult to interpret much of what the sages say any other way than that's clearly what they're saying. Like, we're going to die a horrible death, but somehow that's going to cause the greater good, and it's good because we're sinful people, and the horrible death that we're going to die is beneficial for our place in heaven, or cleansing us for sins anyway. It's very
where
difficult
does
to
it
read the
say
books as
Jews are
saying
going to
anything
die?
other than that.
Which verse says Jews are going to die a horrible death and it'll all be worth it for the sake of humanity?
Well, I mean, if you want to start with Moses, there's long sections. There's the curses in two different books that go through verses, and it's saying, I mean, we're being, like, it's the E. Michael Jones statement that I agreed with, that the sages, I was taught, I was forced. I mean, like, as a wannabe Jew, someone who wanted to get in, to the rabbinic circles to really understand it, I was forced to accept E. Michael Jones' principle for myself, and theologically, that, like, anti-Semitism is caused by bad Jewish behavior, period. And that's just what the book said, that what the rabbis taught when I got to Israel. So if you're looking straight at the verses are very scary, because, like, the punishment for almost every infraction is death. And not only that, there's warnings that if basically for this horrible torture and destruction, should the justice system break down. Like, you're talking about the 7 Noahide laws. Like, so you're giving a practical secular chronism or secular Noahide laws, but that's not the way the scripture speaks. and that's not the way the sages speak, because they're giving some sort of divine karmatic fear-based system that doesn't require man. Man is not required to act properly, because God has the system rigged in a certain way that if you don't act properly, you're going to suffer so much pain that you would never even consider sinning again. And like you, all you have to do is like read Moses, any of the prophets, or the Quran, and like your blood gets flowing like that, because it's not like, oh, you're special, you're great. It's like a bunch of rules and then warnings of the death penalty if you don't follow them. I mean, you're talking secular Quranism. It's like, how many times does the Quran mention something with the punishment being death? And like certainly the Hebrew scriptures, I would say probably at least 1,000 times in the book of Moses does it mention the penalty of death.
Interestingly, the Quran says hypocrites go to hell. So some might interpret it to be even harsher, because we all know that we've been that we at some time in our lives have been hypocrites, pretending to believe stuff in order to raise our status and be thought better off.
But it's both, because the Hebrew prophets don't really focus on the afterlife, so almost all of it focuses on death or torture in the material realm. So I mean, if you
Well,
look at the
yes. So
curses,
you have four death penalties: burning, beheading, strangulation, and stoning,
but then
depending
you
on.
also have a generic warnings of the destruction of society should society become immoral. So there's straight up like legally God-fearing people who properly set up a court system. These are the rules and these are the punishments. But should society fail to set up a proper system, then God will work justice in his own ways, and that's through destruction. And in the prophets, that's basically completely material human destruction. It's not until later, the New Testament or the Talmud, that you start having thoughts of the suffering coming in the afterlives. And certainly the rabbinic, in the Kabbalistic, will focus on reincarnation and the punishment afterlife. So like not only do you suffer in this world, you suffer in the next world, and various concepts. It's the same idea. I mean, saying the Bible's the motive. There's certain aspects about universal human nature. So I'm a universal humanist. I think that all people as individuals and groups, it's just different balances. Like the Aristotelian means, there's a set of variances among humans, and different people are set at different levels, and different groups of people collectively are set at different levels. So anything that you're going to have to explain, there's nothing unique about Jews or Jewish group strategy that couldn't be employed by another people. But then you have to look at the text and what the Bible actually says. And this question. So I've been, what is Judaism? What Jews do or what Jews say? So
Well,
unfortunately,
it's what I would have thought. It's what their religious principles
yeah. So
require them to.
how does the religious principle describe this mechanism that, I mean, so basically from the prophets to the sages today, there's this mechanism where Jews don't do what they're supposed to do. They come up with some other thing that they call Judaisms, but not really Judaism. And then, God forbid, they get destroyed. And then true Judaism is restored until eventually the final cycle, like basically the boom bust cycle, until the final messianic cycle where the cycle no longer has to repeat. So like, here's just a classic example where you have Jewish organizations, the state representing something that's not Judaism, and the true representatives of Judaism, say theoretically the Haredim, that are being silenced and persecuted. So God will destroy the false Jews and restore the proper Jewish status to the true followers of Judaism, and the cycle will repeat until Messiah comes. And it's really unquestionable. That's the basic way to read the prophets, the Kabbalah, the sages, understanding of history, anti-Semitism. Is like, yeah, people have free will, and over a period of time, the majority of Jews will go off, and then God will have to, basically destroy the world to cleanse it in order that the cycle could repeat until the eventual Messiah and the final cleansing cycle, that there'll never have to be another cleansing. And you say, yes, I ascribe,
So
I believe that that's an accurate description of reality. But if you don't, then you say, well, clearly this Jewish belief system has something to do with why normal, relatively good liberal woke Jews are so hell bent on committing genocide.
Probably, most Jews don't believe in God. I mean, half the Jews are secular, and maybe even the ones who say they believe in God don't really believe in God.
Yeah, the
Isn't
main
that
heresy
quite
that so
comical?
Zionism's the main heresy that dominates across the board. So I mean, Zionism starts as a religious heresy where you have extremely religious Jewish heretics that become Zionist, but eventually Zionism becomes a mass secular movement to put all Jews together, and most Jews end up buying it. They collectively like, yeah, I'm a Jew, I'm a Zionist, I support the Jewish state, it makes sense. And so you have this combination of the atheistic, like, what does it mean to be a Jew? Why do we need our own state? So it's like, well, I'm a Jew, we come from Israel originally, and we have to reestablish the homeland. So they're somewhat on this biblical mission as a secular Jew because the Bible is still what's defining their identity. I mean, it's like, my mom's 99.6% Ashkenazic Jewish, and if that means really she's 60% European. But I mean, saying that identity, no, like I'm a descendant. My identity is I'm the good guy in the Bible. My identity, even me, like, I mean, relatively, I'm like 75% European, but like my identity in my mind is I'm a Jew, and how I understand what it means to be a Jew is essentially I'm the good guy I'm the good guy the Bible talks about, and there's really no way
But
to
they're all
escape that.
bad Jews, though, aren't they? They are bad Jews. It's not saying all Jews are virtuous. There is this idea of being a righteous Jew and an unrighteous Jew, a righteous Gentile and an unrighteous Gentile. And all these laws of God are to guide us and to make us work
Yeah,
out
yeah, and so
who's righteous and who's not righteous.
the Kabbalah puts it in a much more fearful way that if most Jews knew that's how it expressed it, they probably wouldn't want to be Jewish. But it's not that Jews are good. I mean, it's really what I call the demiurge, the force of progress. So Jews are the force of progress, good or bad. So, in I mean, it's scary to put straight up, but basically saying it's the world is going to eventually become enlightened, and if the Jews do it like you say through properly preaching, otherwise the world will become enlightened through the blood of Jews. And that's what our own religion teaches, and that's it's not like an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. That's what our own sages, that's what our own religious, you call it the Jesus principle, but like an improper Jew will still fill that divine function as the light upon nations, um, as a martyr.
Yes, because they'll be punished. As you were talking, you mentioned Deuteronomy chapter 28, which has a
And they'll
list
be
of
punished with, God
blessings
forbid.
for obedience and curses for disobedience. So you're there to show us a way. Like, well, don't go where those Jews are lying there in the pit of
I'm just saying
hell,
theoretically,
because they
what's
went
more
the wrong
scary?
way.
What's more
Go,
scary, what Deuteronomy says or what the worst anti-Semite says?
Deuteronomy is scary,
Is there
I would
any
say.
anti-Semite known today, even the worst of the worst, that says anything nearly as bad about the Jews as the curses in Deuteronomy?
No, they're pretty bad. And there's also a kind of humor to it because it ends by, and you will all be sold as slaves, but nobody will buy you because you're so bloody useless. So Jews don't even, have the benefit of being, bought as slaves. Well, were they to be condemned
I mean, it's
to
ironic because like our
slavery?
own religion itself teaches us that God had to threaten us with death just to be Jewish. Like our own
Yes,
teaching and sages, say that like it's not good to be a Jew. Like if God didn't actually threaten to kill us, even we ourselves didn't want to be Jewish. Like God literally had to say, accept the Torah or die for us to accept the Torah.
yes, you didn't really enjoy the benefit of free will, it would appear, since not keeping the Sabbath
I mean, so why did
attracts a
God
death
choose the
penalty.
Jewish people? I mean, it says because we were stiff necked, we're stubborn. It
Hmm.
didn't say because we're
Well,
good or any other aspect, but I'm saying that it's this aspect of what is that. My point is, Judaism is a mythological identity, like the Aryan people. That there are no Jews. It's a fake story. There weren't these are made up mythologies, and the identity to be the descendants of these myths is false. So anyone saying like whatever reason, like my ancestors 500 1,000 years ago like read the Bible, attached onto this identity of Judaism and centered their life around it, but it was largely just a mythological identity that's not true. And so that's my new take on Jewish identity. I mean, there is some aspect of shared identity and family history, or maybe coming from the Levant, and that's my explanation. Unfortunately, for like what you're saying is probably true. Like, yes, like Jews are going to be punished for the collapse of society, and like you're saying, it's like, well, the Bible says like you didn't secular like the Noahide laws, the Lubavitch Rebbe, the sages, you had to set up just courts. You failed to do that, and now you're going to be punished. That's what your own books say. I mean, that's basically your message, right?
yes, yes, but before I forget, you mentioned the Jesus principle. What did you mean by that?
It's according to Mosaic law, you need a blood sacrifice to atone for certain types of sins, and you
Oh,
need
I
the
see.
temple.
Okay, the Lamb of
I mean, I
God,
mean so,
that kind
so
of thing.
the Jesus principle is suffering for the sins of others. And so this is why I'm telling Jennifer, most Jews I've spoken to, a few have accepted this. There's some sages, there's most of the verses are actually, God forbid, maybe referring to you. And, because, but that Jews are responsible for the suffering of humanity. In fact, people do have a right to blame their problems on, uh, they don't have to blame it on Jews, but God, and the verses are specifically related to the destruction of the Jewish people due to the cry of the widow or an orphan. There's multiple times where the Bible clearly warns that if an orphan or widow shall cry out to God, that society is unjust. And let's say they're right, saying because society is unjust, and you have orphans and widows there that are honestly crying out to God. And when that happens, God will destroy the Jewish people. I mean, Moses, the Bible clearly says that's the case, that the cry of an orphan or a widow does have the power to destroy the Jewish people. I mean, I even
Yes,
interpret that like Hitler or something like that, or Stalin, who were both orphans in that sense. Like, from a theological, why did God, so to say, allow Stalin or Hitler to rise up to be the force that destroyed the Jews? And it's clearly these verses about the cry of the orphan. And I even mentioned, I told this on Luke Ford in Mein Kampf, where Hitler even talks about crying out to God, and to say that the destruction of the Jews from that theological basis was the answer to the tears of the orphan, and the orphan in that case was, God forbid, Hitler.
hmm.
But I'm
But
saying, you as a widow, I mean, are you a widow? I mean, you don't have to give your
yes,
personal information, but let's say theoretically you're not a widow.
I am a widow. Yes.
I mean, so it's more about the orphan, but there also are a few places where it's saying like, no, you as a widow have the power to destroy the Jewish people, and saying if society is so rigged, and the widow has to be protected. And if society is so rotten that the widow is not protected and she cries out to God, God will answer the widow's tears by destroying the Jewish people. I mean, that's kind of the mechanism that's straight up said in the prophets. I mean, that's what Moses says. I'm
Is
sorry.
that a verse in the Torah or something?
Saying
I don't remember
there's multiple
this.
verses. And saying the most mentioned verse in the Bible is the warning to be nice, to care for the widow, the stranger, and the orphan. Like numerically, I think the verse comes about 40 times. It's not always the same. Sometimes the list it always includes the orphan and the widow. I think sometimes it includes the stranger, or sometimes it even includes a few others. But that verse is, it's basically like 10 times in every book. It's one of the, I mean, you're familiar with that, like warning, beware, you'll be nice to the orphan, the widow, and the stranger. I mean, you want to do a Google search how many times that verse is?
Um,
But
y-
added on
yeah,
to that, there's 2 or 3 times that it's mentioned that that it actually gives a punishment. and it says, "Be nice to the orphan or the widow, because if the orphan or the widow shall cry out to God, that God will answer." And I think there's two places where it explicitly says it, and there might be another place like the widow is not as powerful as the orphan, but it clearly says straight up in the verse that's mentioned one of the most times in the Torah, the punishment for it, and the punishment for allowing the cry of the widow or of the orphan is in fact the destruction of the Jewish people.
Yes, and the principle that we should treat the vulnerable kindly and not exploit them.
It's Bernie Sanders. I'm saying, like, I mean, God forbid, because like, when I was like at the liberal synagogue, I gave a sermon once, and there was actually a pretty big crowd, and that was in 2016 when Bernie Sanders was running for president. I said the line that actually the origin is unclear. There's a line in the New Testament, but Bernie Sanders used to say the line that society will be judged by how it treats the least among us. There's a verse in the New Testament that's somewhat similar to Jesus judging people by how they treat the least among us. But yeah, I mean, that's the somewhat biblical sentiment. God judges humanity by how the least amongst us are treated, and to some extent, well, does that? Okay, so there's dispute whether the widow, the orphan. Most people think it includes non-Jews, just because the stranger, the widow, and the orphan, that is clearly including non-Jews. So I mean, certainly, if you're thinking like a kid in Gaza, a orphan or a widow in Gaza, their tears will destroy the Jewish people according to Jewish theology. And I mean, that's why, like, I asked my Jewish friends that I've spoken to IRL, or even now any Jews listening to us, and I put in this terms that really bothered them just to hear it. It's like, you honestly think you're going to get away with this? And I could see, if you're Jewish right now or a Zionist, you think, yeah, it does look like we're going to get away with this. It does look like they, like there's not going to be any repercussion, and they are going to get away with this. I mean, specifically the genocide in Gaza. But I would say, well, even if the U.S., the legal system isn't going to punish you, if the Palestinians and the Arab countries have no military power to stop you, do you think God is going to let you get away with this? Do you think God is going to side with Israel committing genocide? And if it's not and even, saying God supports the Jewish people, but God generally sticks up for the little guy, sticks up for justice. And in this case, if justice is on the side of the Gazans, God will take the side of the Gazans over the Jews.
Or I suppose it's possible to interpret the fate of the Gazans as punishment for Muslims for not obeying the laws of God. That's also possible, because I suppose, if suffering is punishment for sin, then if you're suffering, you must have done something wrong, because nobody's perfect.
I noticed when Khalid talked to E. Michael Jones, and E. Michael Jones asked him, like, Muslims, if he believed in the 10 Commandments, and he hesitated a second. I think he hesitated because what I told him, and one of these bigger disagreements with Islam, one of these things that most Jews don't know is an integral part of Jewish theology. But like, I mean, it's clear straight in the 10 Commandments about children are punished for the sins of their parents. That God is an angry, jealous God who visits the sins of the parents onto the children for 3 and 4 generations, but is trustworthy to reward the righteous for 1,000 generations. But all over the text in the Talmud, when Moses is asked why the righteous prosper and the wicked suffer, the first main answer is that they're being punished for the sins of their ancestors, or rewarded for the sins of their ancestors. So in any mainstream Judaic interpretation on anything, it's usually going to be, even like the Esau, the whole Muslim, Christian, Esau, Ishmael, the Gentile nations that are largely predetermined by the sins of their ancestors, going like the Noahide laws, like I said, that according to Jewish theology, Jews don't actually need to teach the Noahide laws to God, to the Goyim. That's their independent commandment that God will sort out without the help of the Jewish people. And the obligation, you're already obligated to the Noahide laws through your ancestors, whether they taught you or not. And if your parents didn't teach you to be Noahide compliant, it's not the responsibility of the Jews, and you're eligible to be punished. Um, in that case, you're being punished for the sins of your ancestors. And even to look at Gaza, in the case of like the widows and orphans, or the Amalek, in the case of Amalek, you God forbid, you also have to kill the widows and the orphans. Um,
Hmm.
I would say theologically, because it's an important theological question, and it's pretty sensical to understand the world through. I would say it's more sensical than reincarnation, although I also believe in reincarnation, but I think it's more sensical than reincarnation, the simple biblical portrait that children are rewarded and punished for the sins of their fathers, of their
Right.
forefathers.
So are you also discussing, referring to the problem of evil?
Well, I mean,
Why
so if you're
God
looking like,
allowed?
why is the blue man suffering? Why are the Palestinians suffering? Why are these suffering? Um,
Because
it,
they have been disobedient, and there are a long
Well,
list
I'm
of
saying a
curses for
true biblical
disobedience.
answer is the ultimate biblical answer is they're suffering for the sins of their ancestors. There's going to be an independent. Why is this current person in Gaza suffering right now? But why are the people in Gaza suffering right now as a whole? The answer is for the sins of their ancestors, or any of the issues. So the biblical has a long generational view, and people are nations, families rise and fall over generations, and nations don't fall due to the decision that they made currently. They fall slowly over time. And I mean, if you understand the biblical narrative, like you have to, and especially if you understand modern politics, geopolitics, biblical prophecy, in a sense that the biblical narrative is still what describes reality, then the most important factor to understand is largely how people are being rewarded and punished for the sins of their parents, and that's largely what the Bible and the sages and the Kabbalists, that's what their literature is bringing down. That the story of the Bible is not just a story that happened a long time ago; it's a story that's still happening today, and the very people around the world are the descendants or reincarnations of these biblical people that are acting in accordance with the good and bad deeds of their ancestors. So, I mean, uh, a true rabbinic perspective has to have this main working, that God works through punishing and rewarding people for their. I mean, it's just written, like if you're a Jew, you say these prayers every day, and that's just what it says.
Right, but suffering could be punishment for sin, or
Or
a
for the sin of
trial,
your ancestors.
because Job hadn't actually done anything wrong, even though his friends, turned up for the funeral of his children and everything, and that they were saying, well, he must have done something wrong, and in fact, he hadn't done anything wrong at all. But it was just a trial for Job, who now has his own book in the Tanakh.
Yeah, he was being tested in that case, and that's why his own book. But his friends that give the presumption that God is just. If a person is suffering, it has to be because they've sinned. So if you see a person who's doing well, it has to be by definition because God is rewarding them. And if you see a person who's doing badly, it has to be by definition that God is punishing them. So, just try to understand, like, well, this guy looks like a pretty good guy and he's not doing that well, or this guy doesn't look like such a great guy and he's doing pretty well. And so you have to add in the factor of, I mean, reward and punishment is difficult in the first place. It's not man's duty to understand reward and punishment. So what I'm saying is completely theoretical, because really man's not supposed to delve too much into, besides themselves, or unless they want to be a judge, the whole conception of reward and punishment. We're saying if we're talking about geopolitics and you want a Judaic look at things, um, you have to add this factor in that, like, well, what's happening to you is not, it's not about you, it's about your ancestors.
Well,
So like
it could be
what's happening to you
you're
right
being
now only has
tested
a very little
for.
to do with you yourself. It has mostly to do with what you've came from, the last few generations collectively. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
you as
but
a Chinese
there would
person
be
might naturally
collective
see it
and
that way,
individual punishment, wouldn't there? I mean, God is surely capable of punishing a group as well as rewarding and punishing individuals
but that's not
for
how
the
God.
good.
Of course, God is capable, but God and the prophets told you how God does certain things, and that's not how God says he operates.
But the point is,
God
just
punished
because
God.
somebody
God
is
could, yeah, I mean,
doing
God
well
maybe
and writing,
Like Islam that largely rejects that. God could have created a system where people are wholly rewarded and punishment for what they themselves do, but that's not the system the God of the Hebrew prophets created. The God of the Hebrew prophets clearly delineated and created a system where people are rewarded and punished, um, partially on what they do, but majority for what their ancestors did.
yes. So, but also, I think Jews also believe that if they've done something bad as individuals, that they would be punished and rewarded for
Well,
the good they've
of course,
done.
I'm not saying that, but I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
as a
So
people, when you're looking
you
at like
seem
a
to be
war.
excluding that for a
Oh, I
while.
mean, of course, like I mean, obviously that there's individual, but on a larger perspective, like suffering, or death, or something that I mean, the theologians that look at the Holocaust like that, because if you're going to like the Kabbalists do attempt to give a Leibnizian best of all possible worlds explanation for the Holocaust. God forbid, because if you're true to your Judaic belief system, um, you do largely have to accept that whatever happened World War II, the depths, that it has to fit some sort of Leibnizian best of all possible worlds, and that there
That it
are.
was meant to happen, right? That's what you mean by the best of all possible worlds. God, in His mercy, would have created the best of all possible worlds for us. Therefore, everything that ever happened, good or evil, um, had to happen because it was meant to happen. And all
Well,
we're
not
left
only
with
that, but it was
is
the
to
best. It was
learn
the
the
best way
lessons
it
of
could have
history.
happened. That
Mhm.
however it happened was actually the best way it could have happened, and so sages will look at it
If
and
we
say,
don't
"Well,
get it, then it's our own stupid fault, right?
well, I mean,
If
so
we're
there
not,
is the question to say, yes, it has to be that every individual person who dies in a war deserve the death penalty, and then to question, well, unfortunately, in Jewish law, I mean, there's so many things that like are deserving death. So really, anybody could be deserving death. So in that perspective, you're going to have more like a Calvinistic type of view, where basically we all deserve death anyways, and we're just
but we're all
lucky
going
that
to die whether we just think we deserve
there's
it
a
or not.
difference between we're all going to die to saying karmatically due to the sins that we've already committed from when we were born till now, not including past lives, just the sins that your average person has committed from when they're born till now does in fact deserve torture and death. I mean, it's kind of the Calvinistic. It's not just like, oh, I'm human, I deserve death, but like I myself know. I mean, and it's somewhat you could, okay, it's like um, you could argue like, okay, like spilling seed, getting angry, getting, like, have you ever gotten angry? Didn't you know that technically the punishment for getting angry could be death? And so like you're gonna have some sort of text or some sort of reading where it's like, well, yeah, technically, like just getting angry, God could and should strike me down dead right now. But God
I
doesn't
do
because God is.
remember a verse saying anger. Well, I know it's a deadly sin according to Christians, but it doesn't say um, it's a
Well, I
death
mean, it's not
penalty.
the anger itself. It's the anger is like the anger. You can only get angry if um you worship idols or a connection, like like even the Sermon on the Mount where anger is like murder, or where sexual thoughts in your mind are like rape, or adultery, and to the extent like just fantasizing about adultery could be punishable by death. You're just getting angry fantasizing about if anger, the anger is more connected to like idol worship or a different thing, but you could argue that um and they do argue, the sages there are in the books, they do argue that getting angry or jealous is actually a violation of idol worship, and the punishment is death, at least mentally. So that so if you're just looking like, oh, how come it's not fair, all these people aren't suffering, and you say, what are you talking about? The punishment for anger itself is torture and death. Can you name a person who's never gotten angry before? And so, that completely diminishes any, justice in the world. So it's kind of like haphazard because, like, basically everybody deserves torture and death. So, unfortunately, you do have, I mean, that's actually mainstream theology. So I mean, that's Christian, Calvinist, and I'm not sure about Muslims, but I think even Muslims, there's some, like original sin, basically like Like, I'm sorry, like if you looked in the mirror, you would recognize that like God should torture and strike us down, and we would deserve it. We would have no legitimate complaint. And it's like I know because like I was a Hasidic Jew, and like I read these things in the morning before I prayed. Like I was like I wanted to be a good Jew. I wanted to understand Kabbalah and the sages, and they had like these prayers that you're supposed to read, and you're supposed to. I mean, and to some extent, I do think there's truth in that. That saying from an objective level, I do deserve torture and death. Like even if I haven't. I mean, even you say like I was saying like okay, I'm not a thief. Like you're like I worship idols, and you're like, well, you deserve death. I'm sorry. Okay, but like I don't steal. Like I haven't. I got a clean record, but like that's an idol, death penalty. If you're gonna put that, well, getting
Only if you
angry,
don't repent
getting angry is
before
an
your
idol,
account is
death
closed.
penalty.
But only if you don't repent before your account is closed before death, I suppose. So you can worship idols all you like, but
No,
as
no, I'm
long as
saying
you
like
repent in good
if you're a good Jewish sage, you have to say, yes, I do in fact deserve the death penalty for getting angry. You're not supposed to
but
push
I think
back or
it's
something.
too
You're
harsh.
supposed to say, like, obviously there's some crimes worse than others, but to say, if I suffer, it's because I deserve it. I know myself that I'm a bad person. And if I'm suffering, I'm not going to complain against God. I'm going to recognize that I'm probably being punished for sins that I know I've committed. And there's really no other answer within a proper Judaic Kabbalistic, that's the E. Michael Jones, that like anti-Semitism is caused by bad Jewish actions. Suffering and pain is caused by sin. There's no suffering without sin. If you are suffering, by definition, it means you sinned. There's no excuse.
Yes,
There's no way you can
unless
say
you're
like, "Oh, I'm
Job.
suffering even though I didn't sin." Impossible.
Unless you're Job. We have to. Well, I
No,
mean,
even Job.
isn't that
That's not the
the
lesson
whole
of
point of the
Job.
story
Like
of Job?
that's maybe how you or Muslims read Job. I mean, that's not how the Kabbalists or the sages. And I mean, basically, you're supposed to accept suffering. That if God gives you suffering, you should still say thank you.
Yes, and hope to learn from it. And you were saying just because somebody is doing well means God is rewarding him. And I was thinking of, people with their ill-gotten gains enjoying life. We don't know if
That's
their
heresy. That's heresy. There's no such
pleasure
thing as
is
ill-gotten gains.
divinely deserved.
Yeah, but I'm saying that whole. I mean, I'll use the. I don't want ill-gotten gains, but I say from a theological point of view, ill-gotten gains is somewhat heretical because no one could have wealth if God didn't allow them. So I mean, the person might have stolen or got the money through a a method that deserves punishment, but God had to ordain them. It's in the Talmud. It's this like clear statement. I remember I used to go to eat Sabbath by the head of the JDL in Brooklyn. Like so like God forbid, Duvid was I was never a Kahanist, but like I hung out with, I like sung and led prayers, and I knew the Kahanist. I used to eat, and he actually had a sword with this statement from the Talmud on the wall where the JDL guys used to hang out. But I mean, it clearly says even if the enemy has the sword to your neck, that they cannot kill you without God okaying it.
Yes.
And
So
that's just
the,
like suffering, reward and suffering in general. It's heretical to think that it could occur without the okay of God. So if someone is suffering, God okayed it. If someone has um, wealth or bounty, God okayed it. There's no possible non-heretical scenario where people are suffering or have wealth that God didn't okay or even larger ordain.
but perhaps you will explain Kahanism for the benefit of those in the chat who have not heard of Rabbi Kahane.
I mean, these guys were actual like followers of Kahana and I mean JDL, but I mean, in Brooklyn, it's a little bit different than the neo Kahanism of um, what's happening in Israel. And like Brooklyn, it's more because actually the JDL, I'm not sure. I mean, he went to um, a yeshiva called Chaim Berlin in Flatbush. He was kind of modern Orthodox, but went to Orthodox schools. But it was basically about Jews keeping their own neighborhood safe, kind of like Jewish mafia. And the first group that Kahana was raising Jews to defend against was blacks. That Kahana started creating the JDL for Jews to defend themselves against what they perceived as black crime or violence in Boston and Brooklyn. And then later, it turned into a movement for basically genocide, and kind of went to Israel and said that you had to expel the Arabs. And now you have the neo-Kahanists of the Ashkenazic Smadrik and the Spartak Ben Gvir that are even worse than Ben Gvir, but it doesn't really have the same, like the guys I was hanging out with. And I was an anti-Zionist, like they didn't care, like I was hanging out friends with the JDL even though I was an anti-Zionist. And those guys were mostly concerned with security of the Jewish community where they lived, and a lot of those guys were like wealthy and landlords. So at the same time, like like the Jewish communities, not just like the Jewish community because Jews live there, but Jews own most of their own housing and their buildings, and so many of like the JDL guys are already, it's more about defending their property, their business, and their community than Israeli politics. And most of these guys are Ashkenazic and Holocaust survivors, and some of them are even a little bit sympathetic to Palestinians, at least from like the older JDL guys that were actually students of Kahana. And then you have the people that have no direct connection to Kahana, didn't study under him, weren't part of like I mean, when I was in Brooklyn,
Kahana wanted an ethno-state he wanted Israel to be an ethno-state, and to kick out
so
the
in
Arabs.
America, the JDL was also later like a terrorist group, and was like bombed, like they were involved in terrorism, and even breaking up like interfaith marriages and levels, and they had a lot of problems. But I'm saying the American JDL was more kind of like American mafia, Jewish mafia. And then when Kahana moved to Israel, it became a different movement. And I mean, and Kahana's before the internet, before airplane travel was so cheap. And now like American religious Jews, they're back and forth to Israel constantly. They're on the internet. They're connected to things in Israel. But I'm saying like relatively, like the JDL guys in Brooklyn, those guys were more concerned with protecting their communities, and now they're actually they've been replaced by what they call the Shomrim. So the JDL is more historic, that they're not really that powerful anymore. And now Jewish mafia, in the sense of like the real estate landlords and the people that keep the Jewish community safe, are what's referred to as what they call the Shomrim, which I'm sure they have in London also.
Yes. So
They're probably remnants of the JDL, like the old guys that talk tough. But like in terms of like actually having like tough guys that are walking the streets, you don't really have the JDL like that, and just became a genocidal political movement. And even in, I mean, we could go in full detail. I mean, you've had Kahanists of all sorts, but I'm saying like, and saying I don't mean to like dox people or give names, but I'm saying like no, like I knew
Yoram Hazony was
I'm saying I knew
acolyte of Kahane, wasn't he?
I worked under
Yoram
direct.
Hazony was an acolyte of Rabbi Kahane, wasn't he?
Yoram
Yoram
Hazony.
Hazony.
Well, he's an acolyte. I'm saying like this guy in Brooklyn, Yoram, like I'm saying, if Yoram Hazony would if he, I mean, even like who's that guy? Mark Shapiro, the guy Luke Ford likes to listen to.
Mark Levin?
No, the guy Mark Shapiro, the Jewish studies scholar that Luke Ford likes from Scranton.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All these guys are loosely kind of related in terms. Like there's also Shlomo Carlebach that had crossover with Meir Kahana. But I mean, Meir Kahana had disciples, and said like Meir Kahana, like the two things, like Meir Kahana was a blue-eyed man, and I mean, ironically, all of Meir Kahana's disciples that I met had blue eyes. So I mean, like if you think of like white supremacists or something like that, like the inner circle of Meir Kahana was like all blue-eyed Jews, and a lot of these guys were still active, but like they were kind of like old losers. There was one guy who was rich and he was a landlord, and he just hosted the things in his house. And then he actually eventually became a Trump supporter. He was a Democrat. Like so ironically, like the Kahanis were Democrats in New York, but then created Democrats for Trump. And but like kahanists are irrelevant now. There's the scholarly, or if you're
He was
Jewish, there's like,
assassinated, wasn't he?
well, if you're Jewish, there's got to be like a lineage type thing. Like this guy was a student of this guy, who was a student of this guy, and but Kahanism in Israel is much different because like if you're a Jew in the JDL in America, it's basically self defense against darker skinned minorities. Because like almost all Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods are in minority neighborhoods, and a lot of times like the Orthodox they don't play sports, they don't fight, and until like they come across like then they like the JDL, like we need to defend ourselves, we can't let these black guys beat us up like that, and um versus like the Shomrim that are not necessarily as violent. They just carry like walkie talkies or work with the police, or there might be a few tough guys, but it's more, kind of like Muslims where like, all of a sudden like 20 of them come out and they all have walkie talkies, as opposed to like a few
Right.
tough guys that are gonna like rumble with. And even like Kahana in the day, like they really weren't that tough. Like there's never really like a JDL that like went toe to toe and rumbled with like blacks or Mexicans. It was more just tough talks, and then guns at the level. But I'm saying in Israel, like I was saying, like those guys, like at this point they've committed genocide. Like at this point, there are, I mean, let's say there's, I mean, God forbid it's I mean, it's not like the Holocaust, but it's going to be like the Holocaust. You're going to have the Holocaust of bullets, bombing, and starvation. But like I would guess there's probably, in terms of war crimes, there's probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands, I don't know, God forbid, of Palestinians that were killed by bullets. And that means someone pulled the trigger, and eventually you're going to figure out that, uh, Shmuley Schwartz or whatever pulled the trigger, and maybe some of them are Kahanists. Unfortunately, a lot of them are going to be Sephardim or Mizrahi. But I'm saying, like at the point, like it is
What?
probably,
What? Why? Sorry. Who are we talking now about the assassination of Rabbi Carney?
no, I'm
And
talking about an eventual possibility for war crime trials against Israelis, and I was making a comparison to like the Holocaust, because you're going to have people who actually shot people, although that's going to be smaller. Like the amount of people who actually like shot kids or illegally shot people, and then you're going to have the bombing, the bombs, and then acts of starvation. But I mean, the most direct, obvious war crime will be the people who, and just relative to the Kahanists. I'm saying, like in America, Kahanism is much more extreme than it was even in Kahana's day, because like Kahana was expelled from the Knesset for his racism, but like relatively, his disciples and Ben Gvir and Smadrik say far worse things than Kahana ever said, and it's actually now mainstreamed, and some of it's even policy. So I mean, I was just focusing on how we would untangle and actually like figure out and divvy up who should be tried for war crimes.
the IDF, I suppose.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not going to be the IDF. It's going to be soldier so and so who shot 30 people, and soldier so and so who shot a kid, and so and so who hit the button that dropped the bomb or was flying the plane and who gave the order. It's not going to be like like the random guy who came and argued on your channel. It's going to be someone that clearly pulled the trigger and killed somebody. And I mean, there might be
Yeah,
some level of simplicity,
I might have
even like
this.
arguing. I might argue, let's say Ben Shapiro, maybe Alan Dershowitz, like some people, Wexner, some people close to Trump, Alan Dershowitz, I mean, Sheldon Adelson, like are probably also complicit in war crimes, that they had intent and knowledge that their lobbying and pressure of the U.S. government was explicitly for the purpose of killing and expelling Gazan citizens. So I do think there might even be hundreds of U.S. and British citizens that could be complicit in some form of genocide. But I mean, at the first level, it's obviously the people who pulled the trigger and killed people, and the people who dropped the bombs, hit the button, gave the direct order to drop the bombs. And so, like, I don't think your average Jew is not guilty. Even your average IDF soldier is not guilty of war crimes in that manner.
Mhm.
I
What
mean
do you think
it's only the people who actually, like I'm saying, like genocide is a crime, and it doesn't mean like, okay, the Jews committed genocide, therefore all Jews are criminals. It's like, no, genocide is a crime, and it has to be factored out who killed who, and who
of
gave the orders, and who is liable. So I mean, I said really, there, at this point, I think there's probably hundreds or thousands of Jewish war criminals. I mean, it's probably only hundreds or thousands of actual war criminals that were directly involved in pulling the trigger, dropping bombs, killing people, giving the orders, subverting the British and U.S. government through lies.
Yes, and what do you think of? I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi, who's the chief military advocate, who has now resigned.
I, mean, I would
Do
assume that,
you know
I
who
mean,
I
in a
mean?
proper regime, like in a proper, you uh, post mortem analysis, like all of the top brass in the IDF and the Israeli government should be tried for war crimes. Like maybe multiple of them will be found innocent, but like, I mean, if you're like the head of the IDF, Mossad, top three, top five, and any of these ones that were clearly um, pushing and implementing the policy that led to all of these deaths, they have to at least be tried, brought up for war crimes. I mean, they could be found innocent. They could mount a defense. They could say they, whatever reason. But I mean, if you're, I mean, you're talking probably hundreds of thousands of dead, and it's completely unjustified. I would say, like, even if Hamas, even if they killed like 20,000 Hamas, like, I'd say that at this point, there's really, say like, I put it collectively on Jews because we all knew this was happening. We all knew this was going to happen. A lot of us, did things that made it worse. Um, but like at this point, there's hundreds of thousands of dead, and it's on us. We killed them. Someone pulled the trigger, someone dropped the bomb, but like collectively, we killed them. We knew that they were going to kill them. We defended them, even though we knew that they were going to kill them. 2 years later, we're still trying to kill them. We're still defending the people that have been killing them for 2 years. We're still subverting the U.S. and British government to protect the people who've committed these war crimes and to commit more war crimes. Like if it were just like it ended here and it's like, okay, we're sorry, but like no, it's like it's continuing and they want to continue. There really is no plan B, and it could get worse. So I'm saying, like at this point, when all the dust is settled, Israel and Jews killed, the Western complicit government killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. It's going to be very hard to untangle from that. And God forbid, if we don't stop it now, it could be millions of people.
Yes, but when you think of America's history of, say, nuking Japan twice, um, maybe
It's what
it's a
Luke
drop in
Ford.
the ocean. I
It's
don't
what Luke
know.
Ford says. And like historically, the American people in America is detached from its foreign policy. So I'm like, yes, I mean, nuking Japan was probably a war crime. Like it's already happened a long time ago. Like, who should have been brought up on trial, or what body? I mean, it's really like John Mersheimer. If you're like a realist, I mean, I'm like Mersheimer, but I believe in the higher God or spiritual leveling force. But you're saying there is no higher authority to appeal to. So when the West won, there was no authority to bring up the U.S. on the war crime trials for the clear war crime of dropping nukes on Japan, for killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people. And to some extent, karmatically, like saying that, yeah, the blood is still on American hands. And um, people
Yeah,
argue,
or Britain bombing Dresden. Innocent Germans died, civilians.
yeah. And so if you're saying, okay, the world is not Noahide compliant, there aren't courts of justice. There are no courts of justice to bring these people to. We live in a world where where the where murderers roam free and have power because there's no court of justice to bring them in. And it's even worse is that the murderers and criminals are in power. So that even just trying to establish a court of justice system is dangerous because the people in power are already war criminals. They're likely to kill you just because they're in a no escape situation, kill or be killed situation, and they currently have power. So they're probably just going to keep on killing people until they die because they're not going to relinquish power. And then, if you look, well, Claire, it's your fault because you were supposed to start as a righteous Gentile, it was your obligation to create a system of court justice. You say, well, I tried, I failed. I'm sorry. What's the
Yes, well,
punishment?
it is. I'm
You know the
trying.
punishment. The punishment's death. I'm sorry. You were supposed to set up courts of justice. You failed, and like everything else, the punishment is death.
But the point is, these obligations that we fail to fulfill, there is, in theory, time to do it. So I guess America could repent by adopting Sharia, which would include Islamic principles of warfare, which would include the principles of the Geneva Convention and the obligation not to harm non-combatants.
I mean, theologically, this is why it's discussed with Khalid, and like ultimately, according to Islam and Judaism, the cause of the suffering is God's mercy. And the ultimate reason why this is happening is because God is merciful and does not punish us immediately for sin. If sin worked that, like, right as we sinned, we suffered for the sin, the world would be
Nobody would
wired in a
sin.
different way. But we're given a long time to repent. God wants us to repent, gives us time to repent. But if over a period of time we don't repent, then eventually there needs to be some sort of cleansing, and that's why you have the boom bust cycle. But so the ultimate theological, like you said, like America should repent. But I'm saying the ultimate cause of this is God's mercy that did not immediately punish us for our sin and gave us time to repent. But what happens when at a certain point is like, how long are you going to give a person to repent? And that is the cleansing cycle. And unfortunately, I mean, I said this when COVID-19, if you remember, I said it on your channel multiple times. What do you remember what I said the divine lesson of COVID-19 is?
I'm afraid I forget.
And I put in the lines, like everything is a warning to God. It was a warning from God to repent. But I mean, COVID-19 was the first warning to humanity where people were just dying from some disease. Random people were basically dropping dead for no reason. And it was a warning, and it changed the risk reward calculation. As before COVID-19, you had expectations like, well, if I just work hard or do the right thing, I could still get ahead. I could still, reproduce. But like now the expectations, like I might work hard and just drop dead for no reason. Therefore, a person's much more likely to risk their life on the battlefield. But I mean, COVID-19 was the first of these divine signs to say, like, repent or be destroyed. And like and COVID-19 had this forced repentance because, like, basically during COVID-19, everything returned to a relatively kosher state because because people couldn't sin, because you couldn't interact with other people, so you didn't have, and we were risking death itself just to interact with other people. So at least during the worst point of COVID-19, you had this forced repentance. And I also mentioned like the stadiums and
But they haven't repented because I think the
yeah.
reason
So
why.
once COVID-19 ended, people just started doing the same sins again, and so now we've reached the era of war, and basically everything from a divine Judaic perspective, everything that happens is a sign from God to repent. So like the answer should be the same. Like, why did I get sick? Why aren't things going my way? Why COVID-19? Why the war? It's because God wants you to repent. And
Yes,
at
and
this
that's because
point,
most people don't
I'm
believe
saying
in God.
it's a certain point where it's too late to repent, and destruction is necessary. And the question is, what does it mean for us? Like, if you say, unfortunately, as someone who's read the books, I don't think there's really any other biblical interpretation than like we're at this period of the cleansing cycle. It's going to be bad. And as individuals or groups, how do we do as the best? But it's saying we've had our chance to repent.
By
The
doing
chance to repent
shuva.
has closed, and now God forbid it's going to be disaster because humanity didn't repent, and it's not going to be disaster for any
Well,
other
we
reason
can
than
learn
humanity
from.
didn't repent.
I mean, we can learn a few lessons from COVID. I mean, it's only because most people are atheists that they submitted to lockdown. Because if they thought that pestilence was a way of hurrying the good people to heaven or punishing the evil people and sending them to hell sooner, people would have, remained calm and carried on and not damaged their economy in such a way. But since most were atheists, the British came out on Thursdays to clap for their carers, because they were so terrified of dying, um, as atheists, I suppose. But
So you have like I argued with Federucci, and I saw he was streaming. He didn't seem any interest in talking to me, but in terms of what makes a righteous Gentile, I had claimed that the kind of like the Holocaust Israeli narrative that a righteous Gentile has nothing to do with being good to the Jews. A righteous Gentile is someone that's Noahide compliant, and setting up courts of system means you should. A righteous Gentile doesn't treat a Jew special. A righteous Gentile just treats a Jew according to the same rules that they treat everybody else. And
mhm.
although most Jews don't look at it that way, like a righteous Gentile is someone specifically that like helps the Jews. But
Or at least doesn't hurt Jews just because they're Jews.
well, it's saying that my understanding, and you look at the sages, that a righteous Gentile has nothing to do with their interactions with Jews. A righteous Gentile,
They disobey the law,
there's no part
and
within the
righteous
seven
Jews
laws that mentions
would
Jews.
approve of the Noahide laws.
Just mentioned, there's no part within the seven Noahide laws. There's no mention of Jews within the seven Noahide laws.
No, but they're supposed to be light unto nations, and then the question occurs: light
But I mean, is
to
there no but?
whose
It's
one
just
to
a yes.
what?
It's just a yes. There's no mention of Jews in the seven Noahide laws, or you're arguing that there is a mention of Jews in the seven Noahide laws.
There is no mention of Jews in the seven Noahide laws.
Yes. So what makes a righteous Gentile? Righteous Gentile is from righteously following the seven Noahide laws or being
Yes.
good to the Jews.
Well,
So in colloquial, most Jews understand a righteous Gentile as someone who's good to the Jews, but I'm saying that's not really accurate, because a righteous Gentile is someone that accurately follows the Noahide laws. In that sense, a righteous Gentile, like if you're a righteous judge in London and a Jew commits a crime, the righteous Gentile should find the Jew guilty.
no favoritism. But
But I
the
mean,
point is,
what does court systems of justice means? Like why would the Noahide laws, if you want, if the Noahide
justice is
laws
blind.
if the Noahide laws were meant to make you subservient to Jews, like it should have said to be like find your local Jew and be subservient, put them in charge of you. It doesn't say that. It says set up a court system of justice. And
Yes,
presumably that court system of justice, that Jews are going to be held to the standard of the court system. And like as a good Jew, like I said, that's all I need. All I need is fairness. Like I don't need special treatment. If you just have a system of justice and hold me accountable to the same rules as everybody else, that's fine.
yes, because a righteous Jew would agree with a righteous Gentile that the Noahide laws are indeed righteous.
Yeah, but it's
So,
an anti-Zionist take on it. And so like now righteous Gentiles kind of like more caught up with like Zionism than the actual Noahide laws.
well, I've been saying that chapter 17, verse 104 of the Quran suggests that Allah is Zionist in the
Let me
sense
just
that
bring it back to like the Bernie Sanders, and like I've always been a defender of the liberal Jew or the liberal Jewish project. And just to bring it back, like if you're a Jew who believes in the Bible and are scared about the destruction of the Jewish people, what should you be most scared of?
what are things to be scared of?
And
God,
according to the
but
Bible,
liberals don't believe in God, do they?
I mean, the answer was like what you should be most scared of is the tears of the widow or orphan. If you're a God-fearing Jew and you're looking like anti-Semites can't destroy us, your rogue nations, Christians, Muslims, but what can destroy us is the tears of the orphan or the widow. That's what our own books say. And so that
Right.
level at the just looking at the upside downness, like Judaism is definitely going to be destroyed. Look at the people leading Judaism; they're doing the exact thing that causes our destruction. And then if you look at like, I mean, I don't like Federucci or something like that. I don't know if he would agree with my interpretation, but just to say, like, I mean, Nick Fuentes is not danger to the Jews. The tears of an orphan and widow are a direct danger to the Jews, according to our own books. And if you're more scared about Nick Fuentes than the tears of an orphan or widow, you don't actually believe what our own books say.
Oh, well, I quite like the idea of Jews being more afraid of me than they are of Nick
Not
Fuentes.
you, your tears. You have to have legitimate pain, and you say like, no, like Duvid was nice to you. And you're saying like Claire Caw cannot cry out against the Jews, cry out and say that the world mistreated me, that everything was wrong because like there was some guy Duvid, some Jew Duvid that was willing to stand up and be nice to you, and so you're not going to cry out to God because like, but I mean, it's not you, it's your tears, and it's the legitimately wrong and saying that the warning from the Bible of saying your tears are dangerous, it's is really what you're saying of the Noahide laws, and this responsibility of the Jew, and Jews are like a management class, and if there's some orphan or widow that's being mistreated out there, it's the Jews' fault. I'm sorry, like we're management, we're God's chosen people, and if there's a widow or orphan hurting out there, they do have the right to blame it on the Jews. I'm sorry.
What I'm trying, we haven't
And
got
so
to the
really
bit.
that's what you're doing. Like, and to some extent it's saying like, yes, you do have the right to blame your problems as a widow on the Jews. And someone like, me has to, if someone like me or someone else doesn't step up and be like, yeah, you got a good complaint there, Claire. Like, let me see if I could do something to stop that. And you cry out, like, we will be destroyed. That's the way the Bible says that. That's how the Bible gives the karmatic spiritual, thing. It's not about like Fuentes or counter Semites, it's about your tears.
Right, right. I'll certainly bear that in mind. But I
It's
was
not
going
me.
to
I'm saying
say,
that's what if you want, let me find. You could say what you say. I'm going to find the verse. I'll read it straight up.
okay. So what I was going to say was that it's actually in the interest of Jews to ensure that Gentiles are righteous, because because 99% of the human population are Gentiles. It would suit Jews if Gentiles were righteous and treated Jews properly, and therefore it would help them if the no-hide laws were um, everywhere being enforced and maintained. And an extension of that would be, well, wondering what the no-hide laws are. I mean, I think five of them would be, completely uncontroversial even to atheists, and they would be the prohibition against murder, uh, theft, sexual offences, sexual immorality, eating an animal while it's alive, and the positive obligation to establish legal courts of law in a legal system. It's the first two that would be controversial because they would
I
be
put it in the chat if
prohibitions
you want to
against
read. If you want to
idolatry and
read it, do you
blasphemy.
see it, or can you share it? The Exodus 22:22.
Exodus 22. Hold
It's in the
on.
chat. I put it. So if you could share it on the screen or read
Oh,
it.
okay. Alrighty. Um,
If you could do both, like if you're just StreamYards, just click on it and it should share it to the
Okay,
screen.
I'll just type it in. Exodus. No, actually, what am I doing? I do actually have a
I put it. I mean, I
Bible
was hoping you
in
would read it.
front of me.
I'll read it if you want,
Yes.
but if you,
So no, I'm happy to read. So it's 22. What I'm actually going through my
Exodus
hard
22,
copy.
22 to 24, chapter 22, verse 22 to 24. And there's another place in Deuteronomy where it says the same thing. And there's a third time where it has a slightly lesser, but it says at least three times it has this. I mean, the verse itself, the first part is said 40 times, one of the most common verses, but there's two or three times where it includes the punishment.
Yes, it comes under, well, chapter 22 is protection of property, social responsibility is the bit that I'm going to read now, starting with verse 22. It says, "Do not take advantage of a widow or an orphan. If you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows and your children fatherless."
There's
And
some
then
also collectives. I mean, there's one like kind of how people feel. I mean, so ironically, people feel this way like about pedophilia and child protection. But you have the Bible aspect here about the orphan or the widow, where it's kind of like, do not mess with the orphan. Like the punishment for messing with the orphan is literally death. But it's
Mm.
not like a court system. It's God Himself that will create some sort of system. Like if you start messing with orphans, you're gonna die. And, and like I said,
Mm.
it's not clear whether, I mean, because stranger is a non-Jew, so it's not clear whether it's unclear whether it means Jewish orphan. Some people said it only means Jewish orphan or widow, but there are sages that say in this case that's not the case. Like if it's in your society and there's a non-Jewish orphan or widow, I'm like certainly you can't take advantage of them. But then further say if just society is so corrupt where orphans and widows are being taken advantage of, that's when society collapses. That's when God destroys society.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not it's not
And
it's not like Nick Fuentes and like anti-Semites. It's the fact that orphans and widows are crying out to God, they're being taken advantage of, and God is punishing us for it, just like the book told us.
yes. And maybe not even necessarily by Jewish oppressors, but by their Gentile oppressors, because there is no longer any rule of law, which
I mean, it's
leaves
similar to
these
what you're
widows
saying
and
about the
orphans
Noahide. Like
vulnerable.
Jews are supposed to be management, and even if Jews, it's like, oh, people, like you got to take the blame. Like I tried, they didn't listen to me. Like your management, you're taking the blame. And I mean, to some extent, like secular Jews largely understood, like economically, like, Jews are doing pretty well, have managerial roles. If society economically downturns, whether it's our fault or not, they're going to turn against us, or at least they're going to try to steal our wealth. Because like people are suffering, and they're going to see Jews are relatively pretty stable and doing pretty good, and like minimally, they're at least just try to steal our stuff, like let alone to try to blame us or punish us for being bad management, or for failing to step up to our role of management, that you're kind of saying that like that just your average Jew could be punished for failure to step into this mythological, like Jew's not just a person, it's a mythological role, and if you're calling a Jew and are not living up to this mythological status, you might be worthy of this mythological punishment that your book mentions.
Mm, mm. And also, I think, as you were saying, it's advantageous to the Jew to live in a low crime society, particularly at Passover, because Jews have this obligation to destroy their hametz. And this means, well, putting it in trust to some Gentile.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying differently. If you're saying Jews could be blamed for a high crime society, even if it's not directly their fault. So, like, if
Yes,
you're
by refusing
you're
to
looking at
indulge
a
in prayer.
larger theological claim, what does it mean to claim that you're Jewish? And I'm making this larger claim that just by calling yourself a Jew, you give other people the right to blame you for their problems, because people, from the theological mythological point of view, people have the right, they're expected, they should blame their problems on Jews. It's your
Yes,
responsibility.
because they'll be saying, "Oh, but aren't you God's chosen people? Aren't you light unto nations? Can't shouldn't we expect better from you? Instead of being owner of
Or
Pornhub
even just,
and
doesn't your
blah blah."
suffering cleanse our sins? Even if a Gentile would put it that coarsely, like, doesn't your suffering cleanse our sins?
Sorry, I didn't understand the point you were making about who suffering cleanses who sins.
Jewish suffering cleanses the sins of Gentiles.
Does it? Um.
That's what I mean. That's what the Holocaust means. Literally, that's the word means. It's the
Oh,
burnt
I
offering.
can't remember
I mean,
the name of
relatively,
this
it's
rabbi
like
who said.
the management. All of society deserves to collapse. Management collapses. People take, but the Jews get the biggest hit. In saying, because the Jews are God's chosen people. Like, God likes. I mean, it's just these weird language. I mean, God forbid, God likes Jewish blood.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the
God
name
does
of
not
this
like your
rabbi.
blood as much as Jewish blood. Like your blood is not as valuable as Jewish blood in terms of the cleansing that is caused by God's mercy. So theologically, it's always God's mercy, is because God does not punish us immediately for sins, But after the period of time where the Jews, we had our chance to warn people and tell them that they should repent and they're going to be punished for their sins. But at the end of the day, society is going to collapse, and um, Jews as a whole will be punished for the sins of humanity. That's what our own religion teaches. I mean, if you're a Jew, you're sticking to the identity. What does it mean to be a Jew? You have to say, I'm prepared to suffer for the sins of humanity. And like that's the flaw of Zionism. That's like why Zionism's the heresy. Like here's like, no, we're gonna win, we're gonna dominate, we're gonna fight. Is like that's not actually what our religion teaches. And so that's the disconnect where you see that you have all these fake Jews attaching themselves. I mean, remember what I said. It's really the theme of like Shirley Jackson and the lottery. If you remember, I mentioned that American short story.
Please remind me.
Shirley Jackson's most famous now for The Haunting of Hull House, that was made into a movie. That's considered her most famous book. I'm not sure if you ever heard of the American author, maybe like in the 50s. But she wrote a short story called The Lottery. And in The Lottery, it's made to look like someone won the lottery, and they, like everyone's like, oh, who won? And the book makes it appear like something is good is going to happen to the person, but at the end of the book, the person's prize is being stoned to death by the whole community. And then there's a question like, why do we keep on doing this ritual? So it's kind of one of these like plot twisters where you don't discover till the end that the person who wins the lottery is going to be sacrificed. And then this question of why do we keep on repeating this? But there was understanding that referred to some sort of Christian theology of Jews and the Holocaust, that Jewish suffering was the lottery, where Jews, what does it mean to be chosen? It means you're going to be sacrificed. So like Shirley Jackson, like, oh, I'm a Jew, I'm chosen, I'm special. It's saying like you don't really appreciate what you're chosen for. You're chosen to suffer and die for the sins of humanity. So that was, I mean, you could look, I've mentioned that, but like that Shirley Jackson's lottery book was a controversial take, and it was, they tried to ban it or questioned, is that what it really meant? And even whether Christian theology actually teaches that, whether what I'm saying here is actually the official Christian position on Jewish suffering. Or
Yes.
Jewish chosenness. They say like, yes, Jews are chosen, they just don't appreciate what they're chosen for. And unfortunately, what they're chosen for is to be an atonement, a blood offering to suffer for the sins of humanity. And that's also explains like Jewish wealth and power. And they say, hey, don't worry, these Jews, they're doing well. They might look wealthy and powerful, but like you don't really want to be one of them. You see, like they're kind of cursed. They got something bad coming to them, and so I mean, it's unfortunately it's really Jewish theology. Like that's what our own books say about us. So you like that. That really, that's what scares me. There's nothing that scares me more than what I've read in the own Jewish holy books. And it's scary more because like most Jews don't know that this is what it actually says, and have some sort of like rejection. And then it's even worse because like I said, like the books kind of predict that like most Jews are going to follow a false path and then be destroyed. So if you're following the book, or if you're like Haredi, it's like, of course the Jews are corrupt. Of course the people speaking for the Jews are fake Jews and just look like they're winning, but eventually they're going to be destroyed. Like that's what our religion teaches.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's kind of your
Yes.
understanding too. I mean, basically you're Islamic. I mean, you might even have a secular approach. You're not saying like it's God ordained, but you're just recognizing, some like a Spenglerian historical pattern. Maybe if you're secular Quranism, it's not like God required the Jews to do this, but there's just some sort of historical Spenglerian pattern where it somehow became the Jews' obligation, and if the Jews fall short, will God forbid suffer, will be blamed, and God forbid the atonement for the Gentiles will be the blood of the Jews.
Yes, I suppose you can look upon it as, when things go bad, the dominant majority will pick on the minority, whether it be Jews or some other group that they can easily
Yeah,
take
but I'm
it
saying
out
it's
on.
God. It's not. You're not talking about. It's. I remember I saw 10 years ago, the Westboro Baptist Church protested in Borough Park where I used to live, and I was watching the video and I saw some African American convert like walked over and you asked them, and like somebody's like, why do you hate the Jews? And she's like, I don't hate the Jews. God hates the Jews. But I mean, it's like,
Yes.
so you have the perspective. It's not the people that are doing it. It's God. God created this. It's only Jewish blood that atones. So it's not that like people just randomly are picking on a minority. It's that there's this really just crazy biblical. What does it mean to be a mythological Jew? And mythologically, it means that like when you're martyred, your blood atones for the sins of others.
Hmm.
And so you say like that's completely ridiculous, but it's like, well, isn't that what our religion? Isn't that what our books say? Isn't that like when everyone in synagogue gets together and they pull out the holy book? Like, isn't that kind of what it says? Not even kind of what it says, but it's like blatantly what it says.
Yes. While you were talking, I was trying to remember the name of the rabbi who said that the Holocaust was a mercy. Avigdor Miller, who was recommended by Rabbi Misraki, saying that
Yeah.
God was punishing Jews by because Reform Jews are basically heretical Jews,
Well, I
and
mean, Avigdor Miller focused most on like the Lubavitch Rebbe's father-in-law, and majority of the sages was Sabbath observant. Like Satmar and a few Hasidic groups or Kabbalist blamed Zionism, but like in the Bible, the most clear punishment deserving death is for Sabbath violation. And I mean, I have a Victor Miller's book on my shelf here, but even the Lubavitch Rebbe's father-in-law or other people, the main crime that the Jews did that is worthy of the death penalty is Sabbath desecration. That's what the majority of the sages of the time um, connected the Holocaust to, was Sabbath violation. I mean, you say that's ridiculous, but I mean, there's a reason why the sages, or even that, and just think like the punishment is death. Like I just mentioned, um, the verse that occurs like 40 times of being nice to the widow, orphan, or looking out for not taking advantage of the widow, orphan, or stranger. There's no punishment for it. And then after the few verses, it doesn't say like, should you take care, should you take advantage of an orphan or widow, you should get 40 lashes. It gives kind of this like divine punishment that God himself will destroy you for this violation, as
mhm.
opposed to Sabbath. I mean, Sabbath is clearly listed over and over again, and it's clearly listed with the punishment of death. There's examples in the Torah of someone being put to death for violating Sabbath. So the sages at the time, like Avigdor Miller or the Lubavitch Rebbe's father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, most connected to the Holocaust, and there's some basic logic to it. Like, why are all these like what we do to deserve this suffering? It's like, you violated Sabbath, dummy. Don't you know the punishment for violating Sabbath is death?
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes.
your own book that you take out and read that says that.
Well, I suppose because it's so harsh, people tend not to take it literally, and in fact, have been taught not to take it literally for centuries.
But I mean, that's the point. What does it mean to call yourself a Jew then?
Well, okay, so you have this sort of burden of all these terrible
You agree, my
punishments.
Aryan? It's like calling yourself an Aryan.
Well, it just means being white, right?
No, I'm Aryan is the Vedic mythological. I mean, Aryans are basically like Jews. They're this mythological, ancient, enlightened tribe. So I mean, the Aryan didn't mean. I mean, the Nazis interpreted Aryan to be the blue-eyed man or various things, but the Aryan was this lost, ancient, enlightened tribe that had like this secret wisdom, that humanity had forgotten, and all the rest of humanity were basically God's chosen people. So the Aryan is a mythological ancient people that is talked about in the Vedic literature. And if you believe the Vedas, you will interpret this historically. Of course, there was an ancient Vedic Aryan people, and the current Brahmins or leaders are descendants of them, and saying it's almost completely comparable to the Jews. This claim that there's this ancient, enlightened, mythological people, and this claim that like my current enlightened management status is based upon my ancestry, either lineage wise or to fulfilling the wisdom in this, because God basically, this ancient enlightened people were fulfilling the way that God really wanted humanity to behave, and everybody else is just behaving poorly. And so, in that extent, like, that's why people like, I'm the Aryan, I'm the God's chosen person. I'm the one who's behaving the way God designed man to behave, and everybody else is out of accord and deserving of punishment. So that theologically, the Aryans and the Jews serve almost the exact same purpose.
Of being made an example of.
Well, I
Isn't
mean,
that
okay,
what
the
Jews were
Jews are
chosen
different
to
in the
do?
sense because the Vedic literature does not talk about like how God likes the blood of the Aryans, or how the Aryans were like a blood sacrifice for the rest of humanity. They're more kind of like a divine right to rule. But I mean, both of them. So I mean, the Jewish one's much more scary because like the Aryan one is a more straightforward divine right of rulership, as opposed to the Jewish one is more is I mean, martyrdom. I mean, it has like the death cult. It has this martyrdom aspect of the perpetually,
Kiddush Hashem.
yeah, which is the
It,
highest, which is the pinnacle of divine service, and this cycle where God enjoys sacrifice, and specifically blood sacrifices.
well, yes,
Although the Aryans
there's
also, I mean, the Vedic literature also has sacrifices and a God that demands blood. So I mean, there are more similarities, but I mean, I don't know about the Jesus principle. There might be the Jesus principle among the Aryans, but I'm saying that the Jewish, like the lottery, that you're chosen to suffer for the sins of humanity, as opposed to rule humanity. So that's kind of the divine comedy, that the Aryans were chosen to rule humanity. The Jews were chosen to suffer for humanity's sins.
or somehow be a group whose history is studied carefully so that Gentiles can avoid um, the suffering of Jews, and also I think um,
Yeah, but I mean, you're ignoring the. I mean, you have at some point the creation of a Jewish people, probably in Greek and Roman times, and they're an amalgamation of different peoples, but
you're not taking it literally, which
they
makes you a
amalgamate under
heretic,
the Jewish
David.
people. I mean, they amalgamate under the Jewish people, and so whatever the time you have, like like Jews, you have hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews, and in Israel in the times of the Romans or the Greeks, or maybe even in the Persians, a smaller number. It's the group identity is based on this mythological identity. We're not like the. I mean, that's the Jewish, just the geographical, like Hindu, like so Judaism is just the beliefs and rituals of the people
Well,
that live in
you're a
the
Jew
land
if
of
your mother's
Judea.
a Jew, right? I mean, that's kind of
Well, I
the
was saying
rule.
from that's why Jewish is a pejorative, because Jewish just means it's all false. That Judaism is just the superstitions and rituals and peoples that came from the land of Judea, and
Yes, but
that's
people
why they're
remain
referred to as Jews.
obsessed about Jews.
Well, I'm saying
Gentiles
that's why
remain
they're referred to
obsessed
as
about
Jews,
Jews.
because these are just the
And you can't just
superstitious.
hand wave it away, can you? To say, oh, we're just a mythological people, because Israel is not mythological by any means. And
Yeah,
so
see, there's two
I guess
different. Because both words mean this, are referring to the same thing. So you have the creation of a Jewish people, which is basically just the people who were in the land of Judea at the time of the Greeks, and a collection of their myths and practices, which became the Jewish people. So till today, you have what I'm descended or intermarried from the people who were in Israel at the time, and they had a variety of practices and beliefs. Um, but the attachment is saying no, it wasn't called like the confederation of people living in the land of Judea. It was called Israel, and the identity was not like, let's create an identity for the confederation of peoples that were currently living in the land. It was like, no, we are the descendants of this mythological people from this book. And through time, I mean, some modern Israeli scholars like Noam Chomsky or something might be like, okay, like I'm 30% descended from the people that lived in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. But like what that says about actual biblical origins or anything above that, like probably nothing. Um, But like
Well, but there are still
that's
Jews
not
who
what
take
most
the
Jews mean.
rules
They ascribe
seriously.
some larger, like, no, I'm Jewish. I'm the descendant of either the mythological people or the people who created these myths.
Yeah, but there are religious Jews who take the whole thing seriously and not and don't talk about it in the terms that you do, that it's
I mean, they take it
mythological.
seriously enough to commit genocide. So I mean, the point, like religious Jews that take it serious enough to not use electricity on Sabbath, or Kahanist religious Jews that take it seriously enough to kill orphans and widows, or American secular Jews that for some reason take their Judaism seriously enough to support genocide. So I'm trying
Well,
to give a
Jews are
comprehensive
supposed
reason
to
that
support
explains all of it,
genocide.
not just religious Jews or ultra Orthodox Jews, but also the secular Jew or any form of Jewish identity. The problem is that anybody who attaches their name to Jew is attaching themselves to
Could,
this
in theory, be up for the
mythological identity that
punishments.
means different things. So, like in Israel right now, the biggest issue is the Haredim not partaking in the genocide directly. And it's so if you're in Israel right now, you're required to break the Sabbath in order to commit genocide because genocide is so important that that it should override the Sabbath. But like on the flip side, you'd be like, no, like I would rather die than violate the Sabbath. But you have the same mythological status of this God that demands you hold these principles and die for them. And I mean, it's really a disaster type situation because like now, like the politics in Israel, like no one's saying what I'm saying. Like, basically, the main issue right now is forcing the Haredim into the IDF. And then, you have like, well, the
And
rabbi,
turning them into heretics in the eyes of God.
well, most directly, you have to, like I said, like I said, Avigdor Miller, it's the Sabbath violation because the Sabbath violation, clearly the punishment is death. Like, so if you're a God fearing religious Jew, like being violating Sabbath is much worse than being a heretic. And even saying like, even within Haredim, they're not as worried about you becoming a Haredi. They're more worried about like you listening to the voice of women. I mean, you're putting that's what I say. Like Haredim don't care that much about what people believe in that sense. So like it's about the practice, and it's saying it the punishment for being a heretic. It's not even clear there is a punishment for being a heretic, but the punishment for violating Sabbath is clearly death. And so at that point, if joining the army is going to force you to violate Sabbath, clearly, I mean, in certain cases, you're better off to um, violate Sabbath than be killed. Like Sabbath is not one of the big three. Generally, only sexual immorality, murder, and idolatry is something you should give up your life for. You're allowed to break Sabbath, but in the sense of the Israeli army, there it's a larger thing where you're really supposed to sacrifice your life than to join the Israeli army. But it's not because Israel's like committing genocide. Like unfortunately, like they're pro genocide. It's because like the Sabbath violation, having to listen to the voice of women, like non kosher food, and that's what I'm
Having
saying.
women in the army,
Well, no, I mean the
right?
problem is not women. The problem if you're just a person who doesn't want to violate halakha, Jewish law, you're not necessarily worried about what other people are doing. You're worried about yourself. So
Hmm.
what the Haredim are worried about is they're not allowed to listen to like women sing. And so when you're in the army, you have these ceremonies and they bring out women, they sing, and most of the army has like basically like you have to do this. Like you can't bow out of this ceremony. You can't like force us to have like separate ceremonies for the Haredim and like but whatever. It's just like in Israel, the biggest thing was if you're not following like Jewish things, like it doesn't really make sense to you. Just like like the biggest thing in Israel during like the Supreme Court was like hospitals and bringing in um regular bread
Amen.
into hospitals during Passover.
Hmm.
So if you're not Jewish, he's like, what are the Haredim's demands? And like, well, the Haredim's like their number one demand is no leavened bread in hospitals during Passover, and like it's literally their top demand. And you think like that's ridiculous, but he's saying like no, I mean, if you understand the culture, like whatever, that's the top demand. And so in the army, one of the top demands is not having to listen to women sing. And for whatever reason, from the IDF Israeli political perspective, that's like beyond the pale. You can't honestly. I mean, so it is what it is. If you follow the Israeli politics, like they're even willing to largely allow you to keep Sabbath, allow you to have kosher food, but like you have to listen to these women sing. And for whatever reason, like the rabbi's like, no, absolutely not. If they're going to make us listen to these women sing, I would rather be killed and martyred.
Oh.
And like, it's not like a it's I mean God, I wish it was protest against the genocide, but like no, it's protest more against these ritualistic things. But you're making your stand because this is a mythological people. You have to make your stand. And to I mean, my rabbi in Brooklyn, like your Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, who warned about these things, and almost lived to 100. But I mean, he always said like the fundamental aspect of what makes a Jew versus a non-Jew is a Jew is determined by his willingness to die for his beliefs. Which I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of Muslims or Christians, but like that was always his, like a definition of a Jew is someone who's willing to die for his beliefs. That's so you can
But
tell.
martyrdom is also required in for Christians and Muslims,
But I mean,
because we've
that's
heard of Christian martyrs, and I guess Jesus is a number one Christian martyr.
it's an essential Judaic belief. So I mean, just maintains like Islam and Christianity are built on martyrdom. I don't. Is Muhammad considered a martyr?
Well, fortunately, he didn't have to die, but jihad is a
He didn't
kind
die
of,
in battle, or he
this
died
is,
natural. Did Muhammad die, according to the stories, die natural death, or he's die in battle?
he died a natural death.
Okay, but I mean, so it's other the followers. There's a lot of martyrs, and even in the Quran, but yeah, I mean, martyrdom's a central principle, and I mean, from a theological perspective, that's like the Gnosticism, um, which is, I mean, the evolution, the materialism. It's just this basic understanding that the material world is bad, death is good, death sets you free. The best thing that you could, the best, it's like a sign of righteousness to be martyred. There is really
Well,
no.
it's a sign of principle to die for one's principles, right? I mean, Americans have this, are you going to die on the hill of, whatever?
It's the flawed account of the prosperity gospel because um, righteous people don't actually belong in the material realm. The material realm is actually more the realm of sinners than the righteous. So, in a battle for between the righteous and the sinner, the righteous in the material realm should lose because the righteous person is the one who doesn't actually belong here. Like I want to be righteous. Like let's say, I mean theoretically, let's say I always said opposite. You're righteous and I'm a sinner. So the material realm is mine. The spiritual, like you're the one who doesn't. If you want to be righteous, you're the one who doesn't belong here. Like me as the
Well,
sinner,
yeah, because if you're
I'm the one
materialistic
who
and
belongs here.
unrighteous,
But it's the material nature itself, and that's kind of like the Kabbalah, or like the Goyim, the husks, the shards, the Kabbalah. But I mean, it's really the material realm is evil itself, and that's
well,
what you see. Like
it's basically,
Goyim, some part they're part of the material realm, and
it means being motivated by carrot or stick. You're easy to bribe, you're easy to threaten, and you have no principles, and therefore the idea of religious principles came about. And because being religious means believing in the afterlife, we will have to believe that we will be rewarded when we die for our principles. Isn't that how it's supposed to work?
yeah, but I'm saying something even, I guess, more meta. Just your take on the material realm, and that whether the material realm is neutral, positive, or evil. And if you're leaning towards like life itself is, I mean, so I remember when I was young, I was a young teenager. Like it bothered me for years because like I saw this, I was like, what the hell is this talking about? And I saw that I mean, the book I covered, the first thing I covered, the duties of the heart. That's considered by almost all the sages as the best Jewish ethical book ever written. And it had this statement, it had multiple statements that they're, but it said that righteous people look forward to the day of their death. or if it's their death or the day of their death. And for years, like confusing, like they're doing everything right. Why do righteous people want to die? Why would a
Because they
righteous
think they're going
person?
to a better place. Because they
Well,
really believe they're going to a better place
no,
and
no,
not
that's
just pretending to believe,
well. I
which,
mean, so if you
which
have the
sadly a lot of people pretend to
if you
believe.
have the Gnostic, so you two, there's the two forms. There's the one, the question of is this already hell? So when you think like, okay, I'm a righteous person right now, and I'm just suffering punishments for whatever sins I've done to be cleansed, but this is the material realm is actually hell. And my current status here is suffering the punishment for sins that I've done. And once I'm done with this cleansing, I no longer need my material body. The whole purpose of the material realm is to punish me for my sins. And so, righteous people, if they don't have sins to be punished for, righteous people just don't belong here. Or, I mean, even theoretically, the Kabbalah, there's even states in Boot that righteous people purposely come into the realm to suffer on behalf of humanity. So it's saying, okay, I did everything great. Now I'm ready to go to heaven. But people have to
I'll
keep
come
on.
back and show people the way. I mean, but Buddhists have this idea of a bodhisattva,
Yeah, it's the
somebody who
same idea.
comes. Yeah.
Although within the Judaism, you have like the Tikkun Olam, which is the reincarnation. So originally, like the sages, the Kabbalists said like a person might be reincarnated 3 times, but maybe they're reincarnated over and over again. But basically, like your tikkun is the perfection. So your soul, whoever we were in ancient times, and that our soul needs to be reborn, but it's reborn to fulfill some mission. And once the mission is completed, then you don't longer need to be reborn, and you can just wait to be resurrected with the dead. So the righteous choose to be reborn even though they don't have any sins to suffer on their own, but to suffer for the sins of other people so that they shouldn't have to suffer for their own sins. So, I mean, that's already in the Talmud, that you could bring verses that, there's Buddhist, there's the lecture. Um, and then you could even bring that to largely that's the Jewish people as a whole. It's basically what I told about Adam Green, like all the verses of the suffering servant, or that people think refers to Jesus. The sages, the Kabbalists, they like, no, that refers to the Jewish people as a whole. So it's not talking about the suffering of Jesus, the Messiah. It's talking about the suffering of Jews as a whole.
Hmm.
And then if you're
But I
righteous, you're
suppose
just like, I don't even like this body. Like, I want my body to suffer in order that I could be cleansed of. It's this counterintuitive attitude that a righteous person um, has no interest in the material realm. I don't want to be here. I'm only here because I've sinned in previous lives, and just like prison, I'm waiting to be released from prison, and it is my body, in fact, is the prison that I desire to be released from. Obviously, suicide is forbidden,
it's forbidden.
or various things, but there is this deeper theology of Judaism where like martyrdom's not bad, like martyrdom's good, it sets you free, and it's not necessarily like because you're going to a better place in heaven. It's because of realization that the material realm is just evil and bad anyways, and you don't want any part of it.
But then there was a purpose to you being on Earth, which is presumably to pass the pass a test in the
No, and the reason
examination
we're
hall of
here
life.
is we're being punished for the sins of our ancestors. Had our ancestors, like had Adam never sinned, humanity would have never came into existence. Had Abraham never sinned, the Jewish people wouldn't have been in slavery or so on. Like, no, I mean, we're here to suffer. We're only here because it's the messianic, like the 6,000 years. The Messiah should have arrived previously, but didn't because we're sin. And the only reason we're here is to complete our tikkun. And the tikkun is basically another way of saying we have to suffer for the sins of our ancestors.
What you said reminded me of a conversation a Jew had with a Gentile, and he was talking about the Messiah coming, and then we would all lose our free will and sin no more, because um, Jews believe that when the Messiah comes, we won't all be sent to heaven or hell. We would still live in the real world, right? But we would lose our desire to sin, meaning that we would lose our free will. And the Gentile, this Jew was talking reacting to is I don't like the sound of that. I want my free will to sin if I choose.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the material realm is the testing ground of free will, and once we no longer have free will, once we no longer could sin, there's no longer a need for the material realm. So it's the illusion of righteous people have no desire to dominate the material realm, and they even recognize they have no power to change the material realm. They want to escape the material realm. They want to help others escape the material realm.
Which is why we have prophets, I suppose, because every prophet
But they're the ones who teach you how to
points
do it.
away. Hmm.
And
I mean, they have they advance moral reasoning.
I had read it's really till I started studying Hinduism, and it was actually the Hare Krishnas. Like I got this book. I like over researched. Like I started discovering things that even like Hare Krishnas never known. Like the guy who taught Prabhupada, the Scottish preacher, Scottish Church College in Mumbai or Calcutta, it used to be called. And but he had wrote this book that was called The Pessimism of Hinduism, which was Hindus considered him respectful, but I mean he basically, it's like Hinduism's a good religion. There's a lot to it. However, it's pessimistic because it basically looks at life, creation, in the material world as negative. Like the goal is to escape. And I remember when I first started going to the Hare Krishnas, they sing each other happy birthday, and they say the line, "May you never take birth again." And just that originally, a lot of people like it hit them like, what are they saying? It's like, may you never take birth again. Like, why would you wish someone on their birthday that they would never take birth again? It's because like, well, taking birth is punishment. If you live your life properly, you're not going to have to be reincarnated. The goal is to not be reincarnated, to live your life properly so that you don't get reincarnated. And from there, I started to understand what the Jewish books and Kabbalah actually said. Because say you have this pessimism of Judaism in the same way where there's this ultimate pessimism that life is actually bad. I mean, the Talmud clearly says that there's the debate between Hillel and Shammai of whether it was good or not that God created man, and after 2.5 years, Hillel, the usually more positivistic view, agrees to Shammai it doesn't make sense that God created us. But like since we're here, we should repent and do our best. But I mean, there's this general consensus of the Bible, the biblical literature, the Talmud, the sages that has this inherent pessimism to it of life, that like eventually like there is going to be an Armageddon cleansing. Every cycle they always rise up to kill us. I mean, it's pretty pessimistic if you read what it actually says. You could like reform or try to take, but the actual
about Jews? Are you talking about the Jews or Hindu scripture? Sorry,
well, I'm saying so Jews more understand themselves to be like Aryans than Jews, because like it's like the lottery. Most Jews don't look at themselves as like about to be destroyed for the sins of humanity, even though that's a pretty clearly reasonable interpretation of Judaism, what the books say, what the sages teaches from ancient times till today. Jews more see themselves as like Aryans. They're like destined to rule. But it's saying the actual Jewish prophets literature is much more pessimistic, and saying it's actually pessimistic about the material realm. That that to say, I would rather if I could be wealthy and have a big family and a bunch of kids and power in society, that a righteous person would actually rather die as a martyr because they understand creation better, and that there is no salvation in the material realm, and the best way to demonstrate your allegiance to God is in fact to be tortured and killed, in the sense that this body means nothing to me. I care nothing about this body. I would give away this body in a second for God. So you have to have this pessimistic view about the material realm not actually being that important. And so the righteous person doesn't want to rule the material realm. They want to escape the material realm because there's
And meet God
only a
ASAP.
fool thinks they could rule the material realm. A righteous person, they're smart. They want to escape it. It's just the fools who are trying to get power. It's like, it's like prison. Saying like, I want to be the boss of the prison. Like, I want to get out of prison. I don't care who's the boss of the prison. I just don't want to be there.
And also the expectation that the next life would be better than this one if we are indeed going to the better place.
Well, I mean, because no, like it's not clear that, just like in Buddhism, it's not clear that you're going to a better place. So even in the Kabbalah or the Gnostics, it's not clear. Like I'm saying, like nirvana, like I want to be obliviated, not because I'm going to a better place, but because I'm in hell. So even I would rather be obliviated than to continue my existence in hell, not necessarily because I think I'm going to a better place. In the deeper Kabbalah, you say that in reality, the Hare Krishnas use the expression going back to Godhead. If you say like the Kabbalist's conception, like what does it mean to go back to Godhead? And you could say you actually only have unique individuality in hell. And the reason why we're in hell is because we want to be here. We want our unique individuality. And when we eventually go back to Godhead, what will allow us to do that is the giving up on our unique individuality. And that's actually what is causing us our current predicament. So to say, when your soul agreed to take birth in your body when you were born, what was the reason why presumably your soul did not want to take birth. And so there had to have been some reason why your soul agreed to take birth. And it's usually negative.
To learn lessons unlearned in our previous lives. Yes, that would be the reason.
Or to suffer. I mean, it's really here to suffer. You're coming here to suffer. We're here to suffer. I'm saying like
I thought the Buddhist outlook.
the enlightened spiritual sage knows that life is suffering. Even from a Kabbalistic Judaic, like a Kabbalist might have a family or sexual relations, eat nice food, but they know that there's no true pleasure in the material realm and they want to escape it. They're only acting in the material realm for God's sake. It's only the fool that thinks there's anything useful in the material realm.
Who fears death.
Well, maybe even like sexual pleasure, power, wealth, they're all illusions, they're all fantasies. And once you're here, you say like, when you were born, you were actually, your soul was being punished. So I mean, that's the Gnostic view, and really Gnosticism's the basis for Kabbalah. You could read like maybe Gnosticism is Platonism. It's not really what the Hebrew prophet said, but Gnosticism becomes the basis for Kabbalah, and you just have to accept that you don't want to be here. You're here because you're being punished for something you did in a like your soul or in a previous lifetime. But just this nature is like you're here, it's bad. You're being punished. There's no other explanation. Or you're righteous and you're here to suffer for other people. There's really no other possibility. And like, I'm here to rule. Like that's just foolishness. You're either here to suffer for other people's sins or you're here to suffer for your own sins.
Well, that does make it nice and simple.
Well,
but as you say, rather gloomy.
Well, I mean, that's what my point on this mythological. What does it mean when you call yourself Jewish? Like, well, I'm Jewish, but I don't believe any of that crap. So, I mean, what does it mean that you're like? Well, I'm like, like I was bar mitzvahed, and I didn't really understand. I understood even a little bit, but like when I understood, I was I was becoming 13 and I was accepting the law, and I knew what I was saying. I made an oath. I made a vow over Moses. I said the prayer, Asher Nasal Manu Torah Emes, that God chose us and gave us the Torah, Asher Nasal Natamatu B'Tochenu, to be His chosen people. But and then there's another one, but basically saying that when I turned 13, in front of the Jewish people in my family, we gathered around a handwritten scroll of Moses, and I affirmed that these words are true, and I'm bound by the law written in that book. And even as a Reformed Jew, that's what I did. So I'm like I didn't
Mhm.
take like a vow on like some woke manifesto. I took a vow on the book that says, the punishment for homosexuality is death.
Oh, Reformed
Even
Jews
as a
said that
Reformed Jew.
too?
Well, I'm saying I was a Reform when I was bar mitzvah at 13. I was still Reformed. I wasn't. I didn't become Orthodox till later. But I'm saying even as a Reformed Jew, whose like parents were liberal, the rabbi was liberal, the congregation was liberal. I still took the oath on a official, Moses scroll, handwritten scroll of the prophecies of Moses.
And what did it say again? This scroll of Moses?
Well, I mean, it has the whole 5 books of Moses. I mean,
Oh, right, right, the Torah.
I read myself a certain part of the weekly reading, but I took an oath over the whole 5 books of Moses. And you call it a blessing, but it's really an oath. It's an affirmation that I'm affirming that this book is true, that I am a Jew, and I'm obligated by what it says.
Hmm.
And that God chose us, that the God who created the whole world wrote this book, chose us, and we're obligated by what it says. And then so I mean, that's the mythological Jew. So when I was bar mitzvah, I became a mythological Jew who was bounded by this mythological status of what's written in Moses. You're like not you're like. I wonder if Luke ever. I mean, Luke's a convert, but like Charles Moskowitz had a bar mitzvah, but like Elliot, didn't have a bar mitzvah. Babs probably had a bar mitzvah, but like of actually taking the oath. Um, but yeah, that's my new point. Like, so if we haven't spoken in previous years, that's my new approach, is that Judaism's a mythological status, and this mythological status is actually quite scary. Most Jews don't know or understand it. And that's also why I said I have no use here anymore, because like it's like John Mearsheimer says about the negotiations in Ukraine and Russia, where it's like like Putin has no need to negotiate. He's winning on the battlefield. It's going to be decided on the battlefield. So at this point, Jews, Israel are committing genocide, and they're winning. They're winning on the battlefield, relatively, and it's going to be decided on the battlefield. I already spent 5 years of my life warning this to happen, but now we're at the point it's already happened. Like, and me just as a protester against it happening is somewhat meaningless. And so, I want like I don't. I don't. I basically I fear God. I want to be a good person. I want to do the right thing. I've tried to move on in my life. I fear the Bible. I fear Jews. Like, honestly, I fear Jews. Not necessarily because I fear God, and I fear that possibly Jews do have some sort of divine status. But at this, like the multiple truth hypothesis, like I also recognize like this is probably just nonsense superstition, and like Hinduism somewhat set me free. And then I probably spend 6 hours every day mostly reading science and philosophy. So at the end of the day, and that's what Khalid doesn't seem to get when I talk about the West, or that the current globalist power of the West is basically an accumulation of best practices. So like you look at me like, oh, he's a bad Jew, he's a walking contradiction, he's a hypocrite. Some people who see me positively look at me as like, no, I'm just a modern Western multiculturalist who is trying my best to accumulate the best practices from various traditions. So it's like, you can't be a Jew and a Hare Krishna. It's like, well, of course I can. I'm just accumulating best practices from different traditions. And I would even put it in like the Freemasonry to say, like, I'm not an official Freemason, haven't taken an oath. I don't belong to any Freemasonic temple, but in my own mind, I consider myself the true Freemason. Although, like, in my understanding of what Freemasonry is supposed to be in that manner, that would be how I'd put like a greater perspective. Although, like I have a tour. I've been to Masonic temples, but I've never taken an oath. I'm not a part of any lodge or anything like that. But in
Would you
my
like
mind,
to?
no. But I do like I consider myself theologically a Freemason. Although I don't know, I don't know other Freemasons that really agree with me, and like I don't really want to take like vows or go through some process. But I'm saying theologically now, I think I'm basically a Freemason from the best of my understanding of the literature. And I mean, you've seen I've my books, and I know quite a bit about it. But in the sense, like, I think Freemasonry is divine wisdom. Not like I want to join some lodge and accumulate power. I I just want to, literally, like, I want to just get through life the best I can. I would still like to find a woman and reproduce, but I'm recognizing I'm likely to fail at that. But I just want to get through life doing the best I can. And like I said, I want to accumulate the best practices from different traditions. And it doesn't necessarily bother me that, like, I'm not doing any of them correctly. And I think in the modern West, that, or like people who follow me or that respect me, in a more, not like me as the Jewish commentator or Jewish scholar, or the anti-Zionist, but like, Duvid, my actual identity or how I view the world, it'd have to be more in this accumulation of best practices. And that's essentially the advice that I, give to you or Steve or any of these, like, or to Khalid, that at this point, I mean, there's benefits to ascribing yourself like Khalid, or like saying, had I successfully became an Orthodox Jew, I would also probably successfully have a wife and a family. And because I failed at being a proper Orthodox Jew, that's largely my failure at having a wife and family. Um, I might be able to still have a wife and family outside of Orthodox Judaism, or some sort of, I'm not even sure. Um, but you're recognizing my failures, recognizing Judaism has largely been good to me. Like I said, with Luke Ford, me and Luke Ford agreed that nobody recommended I become an Orthodox Jew. Everybody recommended against it. Even the rabbis and Orthodox Jews that helped me become an Orthodox Jew recommended against me doing it. Till today, there's not really a single person that, like, besides Orthodox Jews, that, but still, I think it was the best decision I ever made, and it created a lot of value in my life. I still wear a yarmulke. I still do Jewish rituals. I still have accumulated and amalgamated countless things from the Jewish religion that I think make me a better person. Although I'm skeptical of the system as a whole, its true value, its claims. I think many of its claims are extremely dangerous. And, like, obviously, I think Israel, the Jewish people, are largely committing genocide right now. But at the same time, like, I still like being Jewish. I still like doing Jewish rituals. I still think Judaism makes you a better person in most ways. But for the modern Western multiculturalist, I would not recommend anything other than some form of scientific process of amalgamating and accumulating best practices.
How about Sharia?
And that's why I reject secular Quranism. I would accept. I mean, I accept probably more of your arguments than most people who talk to you. Like, I would, even like E. Michael Jones, like, I would accept that Islam created the precedents and jurisprudence for things like freedom of religion or free speech, and that there's countless, like I told Khalid, that in the West, if you had to put one word to connect to Islam, I think it'd be discipline, even though discipline is not one of the 5 pillars of Islam. There's not, like, the 5 pillars of Islam doesn't include being disciplined. But if you say, like, well, if you're just like, yeah, like most Muslims in the West, they're pretty disciplined, even though I'm not even sure that's a pillar of Islam. But, like, Islam could make you a better person. There's lots of good things in Islam. I've amalgamated and incorporated countless things from Islam into my own life. But, like, under no circumstance would I be interested in living under exclusively the Islamic system. Although I think I could, like, relatively, like, if I had to move to, like, Saudi Arabia or the UAE and be a Muslim and live a Muslim, I think I could do it. Like, I learned the prayer, the theology. I think I could function in an Islamic society as a Muslim or as a Jew in a Muslim society, but I wouldn't want to. And I think that Muslims, especially in America, in my area, I recommend the same, the accumulation of best practices. There's a lot of Islam that probably made a person a better person who they are today, but there's probably a lot of other elements that are just kind of dumb or outdated, don't make any sense, and there's a lot of contradictory things that go against Islam but are actually good best practices that you could accumulate from things like Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, secularism, science. So that's my Duvid and David, and the multi truth hypothesis Freemasonry angle that no one's really interested. Like, you,
Well, I'm
Jennifer.
interested in discussing Freemasonry with you, perhaps
Well,
next
I'm putting
time.
my multiple truth hypothesis, my general approach where it's saying like, you'll go forward, Duvid, now that you've kind of failed as a Jew, go forward as a Freemason, but without actually trying to join a temple or get initiated. But so I'm basically going forward from a failed Jew as a Freemason. So I'm leaving Judaism as a failed Jew. I'm moving forward as an uninitiated and unofficial. I mean, God forbid, when you go to the U.S. and you go to like Freemasonic temples, they usually have like the official. There's two words I forget they use: the official and the something Freemasons. But like so Duvid is like the opposite. Like I'm the unofficial and the uninitiated Mason, as opposed to like all the lodges that are the true official initiated Mason. I'm going forward as an uninitiated, unofficial Freemason in the
Yes.
line of who I consider my heroes of the Western canon. And I mean, even like people like Vivekananda in the Hinduism, but I mean, saying like, Newton, um, the Royal Society, John Locke, the creators of the Western tradition, even the Jews who were most valuable in the Western canon of, Freemasons. I want to be Freemason in the tradition of the great people of the Western canon. But I don't actually want to get initiated or join a temple. Although if people did understand the literature, the wisdom, um, that I could discuss, or what does it mean to theologically be a free? Do you accept kind of what I'm saying? Like a Freemason theologically is just the recognition of spiritual truths and the accumulation and amalgamation of best practices from different traditions.
Well, I think it's part of your spiritual journey to have this
Are you
perfect
accepting that
blend.
you know something about Freemasonry? When I say that, that's kind of what I'm putting at the heart of Freemasonry. Was I was saying I'm a person who is awed by the mysteries of the world, not sure if any of them are true or untrue, and just want to do my best and accumulate best practices, uh, largely through some form of scientific, rigorous process of trial and error testing. And I'm putting that at the heart of what Freemasonry is. That's what Freemasons do. And that's
Well,
when I
well,
call myself a Freemason, that's what I mean by it. And I don't know what other people mean by Freemasonry. If they mean something different by Freemasonry, then we're just, it's just like I call myself a Jew. Other people say I'm not a real Jew. I call myself a Freemason. Other Freemasons might not agree with that.
well, I suppose you're just going to try. You're going to dip your toe into every um, um, well, different religions. I think Freemasons have a kind of social and political and religious purpose in that it's meant to put all the Abrahamic, the adherents of all the Abrahamic religions together in a fraternity so that theology can be discussed without violence and denunciation and eventually a better moral and legal order formed. And I think the attempt has already been made by the founding fathers who were Masons, were they not? That's part of your history.
Well, if they were official and initiated Masons. So, there's most of the people we know they're Masons because they were official and initiated. You can say like a renegade. They're obviously split in Masons, like a renegade Masonry scholar, and there might be a few of those. I see Holger there. I don't know if Holger that's rune or the type statement. Duvid, multiple truth hypothesis. Rebbe Duvid is like a Vaishnava guru, and I'm a disciple bowing at his lotus feet. Thank God. I mean, but like, no, myself, I don't see myself as a guru. I could call myself a Hindu. I see myself as someone who has studied a lot of Hinduism, incorporated Hindu practices, and believes that Hinduism works to some extent. But like, I'm not a Hindu leader. Just like I'm like as a Jew. I had to like look this up, but I'm saying just like according to the Jewish books, because my father's not Jewish, I'm precluded from a leadership position in the Jewish community. Like I could be a prominent member. I could go to synagogue. I could there might be some marriage restrictions, but like generally, like I'm a full Jew, but I'm precluded from a leadership position in the Jewish community. And whatever reason, that's the books. They say that's the ruling. It's ethno
Mhm.
religion like that. And when my mother married a Gentile, it included me in the Jewish people, but it precluded me forever being a leader of Jews. And so Hinduism would be similar. Like, in no circumstance could I ever consider myself a leader of Hindus. I'm a respecter of Hinduism, although I would. So I've read the books, I've studied it. Like, if I argue with a Hindu, what does Hinduism actually say? But I'm not going to put myself. So I'd rather put myself forward as some form of
Muslim.
really Freemason. I mean, Freemason. I mean, you could like a general. I could put like a self improvement guru, but it said like no, like because I'm not a Hindu in that sense. I'm a person who has amalgamated and accumulated best practices from various traditions and has a somewhat sloppy mixture that doesn't make much sense to your average person, because a person would just look at me and say that doesn't make any sense. He's doing all these contradictory things. I'm doing some things that like only atheists would do, but I'm doing some like rituals and chants that and it's somewhat haphazard that just my experience, my trial and error, my problem solving, my karma that has led me to study or amalgamate these various things. But I think I'm still valuable as a Jew. Like I'm still a Hasidic Jew. I still, in some way, consider myself a spokesman for some of the Hasidic rabbis I used to serve. Well, I'm not an official spokesman, but like I was there, I served them. I know what they said, and I think at some point it might come back. Like saying I mean, there might be people that remember me when I was Hasidic in London. Like they know the rabbis, and it's saying like on these spaces, most people don't know the rabbis and the rabbis I mentioned. But at some point, maybe I'll meet some people that like they do know the rabbis and rabbis I studied under, and I don't even know if that means anything. They might, like the Skleiner Rebbe, the Toldus Avram Yitzchak Rebbe, Rabbi Daniel Frisch. I mean, these are prominent names that there's many people in London. They're like, you knew that person you studied under and means something, but then they might look at me and be like, clearly you're not doing it right. I mean, like you're not practicing Judaism right. And then said, well, I'm not. And then you could say, well, the rabbis said like, well, I'm a half Jew anyways. I'm not even supposed to practice Judaism like a regular Orthodox Jew. They had some greater mission, and I mean, it really probably is Freemasonry. Like I would. That's why I keep on grabbing onto it. Like I'm not sure if I don't want to like necessarily endorse, tell people to like run and be Freemasons. But I mean, it's more the literature. Like you're well read, history, and I want to put myself in the line with the historical greats who were, I wouldn't say Masons. I would say religiously Masons, that they believed in some sort of Masonry, and it's really the non-Christian. Really, I'm talking like the founders of America. They're the people that knew that Christianity could not be true as is, and so like Newton, um, Locke, uh, Washington, the founders of America, Jefferson, Adams. Basically the consensus was that Christianity was not the whole truth. There had to be a greater truth beyond the Bible and Christianity, and then Freemasonry became the system to amalgamate those best practices, not only from the Bible, the Jewish, the Greek, the Western canon, but eventually the whole world canon. So that like Jeffersonian, and I mean you may eventually be better off. Like I'm saying, are you preaching secular Quranism, or are you preaching straight Islam or Freemasonry? You're saying just to incorporate some of the good elements in Islam and best practices of other things, or is that like no, like Islam is eventually going to win the West?
Well, I think what is the core of Islam is that God has allowed free will to humanity and therefore supports the First Amendment with Chapter 2, verse 256. And as regards Freemasonry, I think it's actually an attempt to no-hydize Gentiles. So, I think the idea is that if you believe in a creator, then that's a condition of being able to join, to become a Mason, right? So it's Jews.
The main point of the Masonry is it rejects the exclusivity of other troops. So it's saying there is some sort of spiritual truth, and God sends different messengers to different people at different times, and there's wisdom in all of them. Um, hence like the multiple truth hypothesis. But you're just saying, okay, like let's say I agree with you, like Islam is good, and that element of free speech and freedom of religion should be incorporated into the best practices, and could largely be given credit that this best practice that is working now derives from Islam. But I don't think that means we should adopt all of Islam. We should just adopt their best practices.
Well, who is to decide what are its best practices? And I
That you
suppose
need
only
more.
God, if he exists, would
What,
be the one.
so that the point of the Freemasonry is that there has to be some sort of system of testing, or what works, or amalgamation, or boards, tribunals, and then like the ranking order system where you learn different things about different traditions and best practices, and then you have these overarching principles. So it's not like I'm not a Muslim, I'm a person that the West, be like, liberty, justice, or whatever the different levels of masonry, and like these are the main principles that you're supposed to derive out of it. But you're never, not walking away like I'm a Muslim. You have to separate it to say these principles and the parts of Islam that do not go against best practices. As a Mason, you have to recognize that there's parts of Islam that contradict with best practices, and if you want to increase in Masonry, you have to go with the best practices, not your tradition.
Yes, I suppose you go for the most universal aspect of whatever system you are currently studying, and promote that universal aspect
Utilitarian,
of.
Bentham utilitarianism. I'm pretty sure they're Masons also, and like so, utilitarianism is to a large extent goes hand in hand with Masonry, and it's saying like that. But the point is, Islam is not going to help the West. There's certain best practices from Islam that will help the West. And if you're a Muslim
Well,
in the West, you might already know and be advantageous from the best practices of Islam, but you need to acclimate the best practices from not only other traditions, but also, most importantly, because Masonry is the basis of the Royal Society in science and the scientific method. And even the founders of America, like, the geometry,
well,
the
they were
Euclid.
proto-Muslim, weren't they? At the end
No,
of the
no, I'm
day.
saying they amalgamated the best practices. So when they said we hold these principles to be self-evident, that was not Islam, that was Euclid. The First Amendment might have been inspired from Islam, but the other, like the other part, that was inspired from Euclid.
But it's
And you only
foundational
get
to
you only
American
get a
liberties.
document like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, from the amalgamation of best practices. No individual tradition could have produced it. And
But
so
the,
it's
the
only
First
Freemasonry
Amendment
that can
is
produce these
uniquely
things.
American, is it not?
Only
The First
Freemasonry
Amendment.
could produce these things, because like no individual tradition alone. You have to amalgamate best practices.
Yes, but
You
who
have to
is to
recognize the
decide
flaws in your
best
system too.
practices?
You have to recognize there's, just like Judaism, Islam, there's serious criticisms and flaws and problems with Judaism. And like you say, there's good parts and there's bad parts. And so if you're part of the system, you don't get to do that. There's no good parts and the bad parts. They're all the same. They're all equal. They're all part of God, part of the system. Maybe within the system you have a way for like sages, or to slowly change over generations. Within Freemasonry, you could wholeheartedly just do like a Jeffersonian Bible with everything. You could do that with science, philosophy, the Quran, Hinduism. And so like I'm not opposed to your Jeffersonian Quran, but that's not what you're doing.
Well, I'm saying, if you're a Jew and you feel oppressed by all your religious obligations, but you still want to go to heaven, Islam must be the way, because it definitely, the Quran definitely talks about heaven and hell, and so you
That's the
get
purpose of
that, and then you
Freemasonry.
escape your horrible Jewish punishments and
All religions,
responsibilities.
all religions promise that, but it's you can't actually test that promise. So there's certain things within that, but I was saying the what happens after you die is largely beyond the ability of what's testable, or to amalgamate best practices. So any individual system is basically say you have to do all of it, or you're going to be punished when you die.
Well, yes, but the whole idea, I mean, the reason why the Abrahamic religions is more powerful than the Eastern religions of Hinduism and Buddhism is because it has a more powerful God that is supposed to be omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly moral, and knows
Yeah, but
your
it's only
hearts
more
and all.
powerful in certain times and places. It's not universally more powerful.
Well, the, the
I mean, that's
third
the point.
global,
That's the point of the
the
Zionism.
three global empires have been Christian, right? And
Yeah, but
and
there's
and
never been a one world order. There's been the most dominant empire, but there's never been a global empire. There's been, and there's really never even been close to a
well, there's
global.
the Spanish, the British, and now the American, the
There's
empires on
never
which the
been a
sun never
global
set.
empire. They were just the most powerful empire at the time. Like you're saying, the Spanish Empire never conquered China or India.
But it
They
still
conquered
has the
parts of
idea
India.
of being global because they were an empire on which the sun never set.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's what you. If you're talking about the biblical promises of Zionism, you're referring to an eventual global order. Not that the Jews are going
Mm.
to be the most powerful among other, but there's only going to be one power.
Well, yes, and then we'll be better at developing the science and technology
Yeah. So I mean,
necessary
as
for
a
space
Freemason, I'm
exploration, I
rejecting that.
suppose.
As a Freemason, I'm rejecting that. So if you're putting, like you say, like Jews, Muslims, I mean, it's kind of zero sum like that. If it's true, that's what Prabhupada um, said before he came to America. It's like if Krishna is only true for India's, I mean, then it's just dumb. If Krishna is true, Krishna is also true for the blue-eyed man and Westerners. If Krishna is only true for Indians, it's just dumb. And it's saying if Judaism is only true for Jews, it's just dumb. I mean, it might be.
Which is why God
I mean, just
created
dumb
Jews
is
and
a little bit. I mean,
Gentiles.
it's just your traditions and your history, and you look at it. You're saying like you're likely to dump the traditions of your ancestors for modernity and best practices. And so if you don't have God behind the traditions of your ancestors, like no, they're not just the traditions of your ancestors subject to change. They're you like they're the key to heaven, and saying the claim is really it's a wild, unfounded claim. So, like as a Jew, Muslim, or Hindu, to make that claim, I mean, a Freemason is making a much more reasonable, smaller claim than a Jew, Muslim, Christian, Hindu is making.
What do Freemasons claim?
There's different schools. I mean, generally, just say that there's a grand architect of the universe, and that God sends different messengers to different peoples at different times, and there's truth to all of them. So religions are exclusivist. If you're like, that's why I said like
Well, they are
I was telling
imperial and
Swedes
universal religions,
like
and
Orthodox
Christianity and
Jews,
Islam
like I
are
mentioned,
two
like
of them.
Rabbi Sachs. Like Rabbi Sachs isn't a real Orthodox rabbi because like Orthodox, you're forbidden to do interfaith. And the reason you're forbidden to do interfaith because it's not like I'm going to say my truth and you're going to say your truth and you're going to be an equal platform. There's the truth, and I'm here to represent the truth, and what you're representing is only true in so matter as it agrees with what I'm saying. And that's the official position of any exclusivist religion. That's why evangelical Protestants don't do interfaith, and anyone with an exclusivist view on their religion, and almost all religions in heart have this exclusivist view. So that's what I'm rejecting, and I think that's the main power of Freemasonry. That's why America in science was founded by Freemasonries, because they needed the wiggle room to recognize that Christianity is not true, that they could work within
Yeah, because it's
Christian.
idolatry.
Well, not because it's idolatry. I'm saying there are. Well, I mean, even that aspect, to just say the Trinity is untenable philosophically, that Newton or these great philosophers, they weren't able to create the scientific method or philosophical system that included the Trinity. It was just too contradictory, too obviously false.
Yeah, so it was something made up by the Roman Empire and
I mean, even
obviously shredded by Occam's razor because it's impossible to explain
what I'm saying, if you're looking
without
at
ceasing.
Jefferson, he's claiming that he's taking the divinity out of Jesus and the teachings completely. He's saying Jesus was basically just like a Freemason great teacher. That's like the Gurdjieff and the great masters. Jesus. Buddha, Muhammad.
Was mortal. That's
Well, I
what
mean,
Jefferson was
well, even
saying.
even
Well, that's what
even Jews and
Unitarian
Muslims
Christians
believe that
say.
they were mortal. But I mean that the divine aspect that that I mean, some you could say that okay, maybe they were a prophet. There's a difference between Newton the scientist and Aristotle the philosopher and Muhammad the prophet. But in some Masonic order, you're going to rank those in importance. And Masonry valued all of those traditions and insights, but because it was practical, it was based on science and building. Ultimately, the scientific method rose from Freemasonry, and the scientific method is basically your heresy. You can't use this. You can't test the truth of traditions. Like even if you test it and they prove false, you still have to believe it. As where Freemasonry allows you some sort of method to test them and then use them based on how well they work.
Um, I don't know if you've heard of this argument that Jews are the evidence of God's existence. I often refer to this one because the argument seems to come from Voltaire, but I'm not sure. And
Augustine gives the argument. It comes before it, and there's even the bearing witness, the Talmud. I mean, there's previous sources. But I think that Saint Augustine sets the Christian tone, and since in the doctrine of like protection and bearing witness to the crucifixion of Christ. So I mean, there's an even anti-Judaizing. So Christian, if you're, let's say you're going to the Far East to preach Christianity, that Jews are seen as a proof that, like logical, like, you're going to, the Far East, and some person from a, non-Abrahamic religion, you're trying to follow them, get them to follow Jesus, and they're thinking this is obviously false, that Jews are seen as a proof of Christianity. And even in the U.S., the U.S. ceremony, there's a doctrine of bearing witness where you're supposed to, I think it's in England too, like we've talked about this in the past, like where you swear on a Bible. When you're inducted into power, you have to give an oath on a Bible.
Mhm.
So you're also supposed to have like an Orthodox Jew there to bear witness to the crucifixion of Christ.
Oh, right. Well, I wasn't thinking of that one. I was
But I mean,
saying
even
that
going back like hundreds of years in England, what like at these initiation ceremonies, you need the Jews there to, in the Christian terms, like the Jews there are explicitly to somehow Jews, according to Christians, testify to the truth of Jesus Christ. From a
they're
Judaic
not
view, like
supposed to, are they?
obviously,
Unless
like
any
Jews don't
tortured.
think that they're here to testify to the truth of Jesus Christ, but I mean, Jews are basically the proof of God, and even like I
Because
mentioned.
all things being equal, they should have been extinct because they have the hardest religion and everybody hates them and wants to exterminate them from time to time. But they're still around and to annoy the Gentiles. So God must be protecting them
No, I
and
mean, so if you're
keeping
going to
them
say
around
it,
for
say it
his
right.
reason.
If you're going to say it right. No,
Say
that's
what,
not what
right?
we're around to testify to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. We're not around to testify to
But
the
you're not.
Christians
You
do
don't.
not believe, like, I mean, according to the Catholic, like the ceremony, like Jews are not around for what you said. We're around to testify to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
Well, I reject the Christian narrative, of course.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's the Christian narrative. Like whatever you said, like that's just what you said. That's not what Saint
No,
Augustine or any.
I got it from a Jew.
Yeah, I mean, what's some Jew going to tell you what Christians believe?
No, the reason why God exists is because Jews exist, and the reason why Jews exist is because they would otherwise, if not for God's existence and protection, they would have become extinct, and therefore Jews are the
You're,
reason, are
I don't,
evidence of God. That is a narrative.
I don't. I think you're mixing that. But I don't see.
I'll
There's.
send it to you later.
Well,
It's only a 10-minute video.
there's Christians are not using Jews as the evidence of God. They're using Jews as
No, but it's from a Jew.
yeah. I'm saying
This narrative.
Jews believe that Jews are the evidence of God. In fact, even the Kovos Lvovos 1,200 years ago says that Jewish power and wealth is a proof of Judaism. Like even that says like we're despised, no one likes us, but yet we're rich and have power. Like how could it? What's any other explanation than that we're actually God's chosen people? And in the Eastern Orthodox, they have, instead of the sacraments, they have like the mysteries, and there's the mystery of the Jews, and essentially you're saying the mystery of the Jews is proof of God, in the sense there's no other reasonable explanation for the Jews other than that God is doing something with the Jewish people. And so if you're Christian, what the God's doing with the Jewish people is generally not good, and if you're Jewish, what God's doing with the Jewish people is good. But in the sense that like the Eastern Orthodox did have that mystery of the Jews, where um, the only explanation for Jewish behavior and the power or any of these things is that the Bible's true. And but I'm saying, like, if you're Christian, like, you unequivocally, like, no, I mean, Jews are here to testify to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But obviously that's not what Jews think. And I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
Muslims also have, like, in their prophecy, that's what I mentioned, like in the like Muslims don't need Jews as much as Christians do, but Muslims, like, eschatology is almost completely dependent on what Jews do. It's like, Muslims, they're not like talking about what they're going to do at the end of the days. They're talking about what the Jews are going to do at the end of days.
Yes, I think Christians and Muslims have to acknowledge their debt and their ideological foundations to Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Without
preaching
Judaism, there
Schofield
would be
Bible,
no
though.
Jews. Without Jews, there would be no
You're
Jesus
preaching
or
Schofield
Christmas.
Bible, though.
Hmm?
You're preaching the Schofield Bible. I'm saying, like,
Am I?
I mean, you just talked to E. Michael Jones and saying, like, there's not this supposed debt that Christians have to Jews. You're
Well, I
claiming that
mean,
Christians have.
obviously,
You're claiming that
Christianity is built on Judaism, and
you're
that's why Westerners now
yeah,
talk
it's
about
built
their
on the blood.
Judeo-Christian
It's built on the
heritage.
blood of Judaism. Christianity is not built off Judaism. Christianity is built off the blood of Judaism. I mean, that in the sense. I mean, you're giving a Schofield Bible, new Zionist approach, and probably the people you're talking to, the Jews or whatever, that are I'm saying, like, historic. That's not what Christians believe. If you're Judaizing and you're saying, like, Christianity is obviously false, and Christianity, I mean, you're basically giving an Adam Green view where, like, Christian anti-Semitism is controlled opposition. Because because the same, like, no, like, Christianity needs Jews to testify not to anything other than the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and it's largely a negative thing that Jews are needed for. And that's the old basic, that at the end of days Jews will be destroyed, and that Jews are cursed. And that's also, like, the benefit I said, like, the lottery system, that's the Christian Catholic understanding of Jewish success and punishment. That is, okay, the Jews are doing good, well, it looks like they're in charge and they have all the money and they have everything, but just wait till the next bus cycle and no one's going to want to be a Jew. And so if you're Catholic, you see, I mean, really, Jews are cursed people. So I mean, you're putting in the Schofield Bible sense, but it's saying, like, the Christian sense, like, of the mystery of the Jews is that the Jews are cursed people, and the only way to explain, and that's why I told you, like, the Westboro Baptist Church is that God hates the Jews. So the Christian pre, like, Vatican 45 view is not that Christians hate the Jews, Gentiles hate the Jews. It's that God hates the Jews, and that so the Jews are this perpetual cursed people that will be kept around till the end of days. I mean, you could reject. I mean, you've had E. Michael Jones. Like, I'm sure he could explain to you, this status. But I mean, and obviously I don't agree with that, but I'm saying, like, within some accuracy of what Christian theology actually says and why Jews are so scared. Like, I mean, it only, like, guys like me who study the Kabbalah and agree with Adam Green, or like Maimonides, that say, like, really Christianity is good for the Jews, and Christianity, but, like, most Jews are scared of Christianity because they know the theology because they've read Augustine, they've read Aquinas, they've read even Voltaire.
And it's
Voltaire.
idolatry,
I mean,
right?
Voltaire.
And
Voltaire
they're
was
scared of
Voltaire's an
Muslims because
anti-Semite.
Muslims say they
Voltaire.
have better
I actually read
revelation.
on my channel, like, Voltaire he's remembered as an anti-Semite, although his anti-Semitism is not so clear. I mean, Voltaire's
Yeah,
more atheistic. He's more trying to Voltaire's more anti-Christian, and he's saying that the proof of Christianity is Judaism, and Judaism is just false. So so Voltaire is doing more like Adam Green, trying to get European Gentiles to no longer be Christian, and he's doing that by attacking Jews to say that the Christian religion is just stupid. It's completely dependent on this Judaism, which is just stupid, and the fact that Christians largely acknowledge that Judaism is stupid makes them even more dumb for following it, as opposed to this more complex, like Shirley Jackson Lottery, Saint Augustine, Jews as a cursed people that bear the sins for humanity, and that also.
Well, I think Voltaire rejected the Leibniz best of all possible worlds theory. He mocked
Wasn't Voltaire atheistic?
Doctor, what's his name in Candide, right? I forget. He's he's called Doctor something. He's this character in Candide.
I mean, Candide is the play.
Being mocked.
Isn't that Leonard Bernstein, the play of the Leibniz play? But I mean, Voltaire is an atheist. He's one of the first mega writers of encyclopedia. He likes Leibniz in the French tradition. Voltaire is trying to really separate the Western Reformation, Renaissance, Enlightenment canon from Christianity and dump the Christianity. And he's taken the Adam Green approach of kind of like Christianity's just like Nietzsche. Christianity is just a Jewish subversion. You're just if you're a Christian, you've just been suckered and hoodwinked by the Jews. And really for Muslim too, that's the similar argument that really Islam is just people who've been suckered and hoodwinked by the Jews.
Right. I'm trying to remember the name of this doctor in the play, and I'm trying to find
the Candide,
it.
Is that Leonard Bernstein?
No, I only saw.
You're talking about the play about the best of all possible worlds, Candida.
Yes,
I thought that was.
but there was a doctor, and he was always there, and for some reason I can't.
I never saw the play, but.
And he was always being optimistic and was being mocked for that.
I mean, I don't know why this play is so important to you.
Because Voltaire was mocking Leibniz and his idea of the best of all possible worlds.
Well, he was mocking God. I mean, he wasn't mocking. He was mocking Christianity and saying that Leibniz, best of all possible worlds, was at the point the best defense of the problem of evil. And I mean, because the biggest, like the Epicurean trilemma is the biggest question to belief in God. If God is all powerful, all good, and all knowing.
Dr. Pangloss.
Well, how come evil exists? So even till today, Leibniz best of all possible worlds is the best answer that we have. The Kabbalist utilitarian answers are basically watered down or lesser versions of Leibniz. So Voltaire is not. I think you're misunderstanding that in the sense like Leibniz is not. Leibniz, I don't think, is the person Voltaire is trying to attack. He's attacking Christianity, and Leibniz is only being attacked for trying to defend Christianity.
Well, okay. According to this sort of brief summary, Dr. Pangloss is always saying, "Don't worry, be happy," and this idea comes from Leibniz's idea that don't worry, everything's fine, everything that has happened was meant to happen because God, in His mercy, has created the best of all possible worlds, and everything happens for the best. Even when the volcano.
You're quoting some play. Like, who cares about some play?
Well, I'm talking about Candide, written by Voltaire.
Oh, okay. I say that was turned into the play.
Yes.
So Leonard Bernstein.
That's why I mentioned it.
Okay, I haven't actually read. I know Voltaire and the Jews, so I didn't actually know that Candide was written by Voltaire. I thought was it a play? Do you think Voltaire actually wrote?
Well, it was a novel, but I saw it as a play.
Okay, but it was a novel, so the play was. I thought it was Leonard Bernstein that made the popular version.
Well, I didn't see the movie, so I don't know.
I
But
mean,
that's the
ironically,
story,
that
I think.
Voltaire's brought to the opera, Candida opera by Leonard Bernstein, based on so that these days more people know Voltaire through Leonard Bernstein. So I mean, you got to filter the French anti-Semitism through the Jewish lens. So unfortunately, I knew Candida was a play was op, by Leonard Bernstein. I didn't know that was Voltaire. Although no, I know that whatever the point is, that still I think that it's a criticism of Christianity in general, not so much Leibniz's philosophy, because Leibniz's whole purpose in doing that is to defend Christianity.
Well, yes, and
When you
obviously
think
the
like
French Revolution
Leibniz is
was about
actually
rejecting
Leibniz is defending the
Christianity.
Trinity against Newton. Even like Leibniz is also within that is trying to defend the Trinity. Right? Leibniz is a Catholic.
Yes, he must have been, but I'll check. Yes, he
I know
was
he's Catholic. I'm saying
German,
like,
and he had a better theory than Newton,
I mean, he defends the
didn't he?
Trinity. Like that was one of the if you go read like part of Leibniz, like he unlike Newton who is a full Freemason and is almost considered heretical to Christianity, starting to cutting things out. Like we don't actually believe this. Leibniz generally is a full Catholic and defending the larger tradition, and even the point of he wasn't necessarily a scientist like Newton. He wasn't trying to solve physics. He was trying to solve theological problems.
Oh, actually, apparently Leibniz was a Protestant and a philosophical theist, and he remained committed to Trinitarian Christianity throughout his life,
Okay,
according to
so
Wikipedia.
I see. I mean, so he wasn't Catholic. He was Protestant, but he was still a Trinitarian as opposed to
Hmm.
Newton.
Yes, must have
Okay.
um, another read of that. Well, David, what time does your stream start with Jen Shah, with
I think
Church
an
of
hour from
Entry?
now. So yeah, we better close it up. I guess if you want to, I'm not sure how late you're gonna, but if you want to pop on for
Yeah, I
10,
think I
15
might
minutes
pop on.
and do more year, not like your opinion on a bunch of issues, but just kind of like a year in review, what you did, what type of content, as opposed to your opinions on a whole bunch of issues. Um, be great.
Yeah, I'll fit into the format.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I like
Awesome.
these conversations. Thanks for inviting me. I kind of, like I said, like now that I've taken myself out of, I mean, my identity crisis, whatever my original streaming identity of like Duvid, the Jewish activist, doesn't really work anymore. I still like streaming. I still like talking to people, although I don't necessarily see much of a benefit of trying to grow an audience or change things, and it's became more dangerous. Uh, so yeah, I don't relatively have any plans now like streaming or influence, but I still like having conversations, especially obviously Jennifer's not that interested in the conversations we're having. I appreciate you allowing me to you know flush out these
Pontificate.
well, just to clarify, to say two things in my head that I haven't expressed in words, and just to kind of the sparring part, the mental, verbal, theological sparring partner, and saying that that's needed. Interfaith, like let's say, like moving forward as a Freemason, the difference between Judaism and Freemasonry is these type conversations, because within a proper form of Judaism, there's really no place for these type conversations, as where as Freemasonry, I think, is built upon these type conversations.
Yes, and I hope you'll come back again to give us your further thoughts on Freemasonry, which is also a subject I'm interested in. So, thank you very much, David, for informing us of your rebranding and your new identity. And
Well, I don't
we
know,
look forward.
rebranded. I'm just identity crisis, and it's more withdrawal. So I'm not actually planning on reinventing myself and reappearing as a new invention. It's more withdrawal and like Duvid appearing here is kind of like, what's up with Duvid? What's he still thinking? But no, I don't plan on reinventing or rebranding myself in that sense. Like I'll always be
Okay.
Duvid. Like
All right.
instead of being a Jewish activist, I'm a failed Jew. I'm someone who tried to be a Jew, but it was just too difficult to be a Jew. So I'm someone who tried and failed at being a Jew, but I'm still Duvid. I didn't become like the next thing. I'm Duvid, the guy who tried to be a Hasidic Jew and failed, as opposed to the next thing. And then as a Freemason, I'm still Duvid the Freemason. I'm still Duvid the person who tried and failed at being a Jew, who's the Freemason. I'm not like the. So in that sense, like no, don't expect a rebranding or me to try to put myself out in a new, light or venue like that.
All right. Well, we wish you well in your new identity and hope to hear more from you in the future and the new year.
Okay, yeah, God bless you too. Thanks for doing
Okay.
this.
Take care.
Best wishes. Thanks to everyone. Chat. If the chat was pretty active, like I was reading a little bit, but I didn't see too much like directly questions. But I'm on, people. I'm on. You could reach out anyway. I have a small following, so if you actually have something to say to me, you comment on the video or reach out. Like I'll probably respond. And as of now, I have basically said yes to every single person who's ever requested to speak to me. So if you like Duvid, just reach out.
All right. Take care. Thank you
Okay, you
and
too. God
Happy
bless.
New Year.
And we'll
All
see you in
right.
a little bit.
Okay.